I am Liwan, 20 years old, and if fate had been kinder, I should have been sitting in a small rented dorm near my university, hunched over circuit diagrams and steel design models, dreaming of becoming an engineer who could shape skylines. Instead, I opened my eyes to the stench of damp earth, raw wind biting through my bare skin, and a sky so wide and savage it crushed the breath from my chest. I lay there on rough grass and broken stone, my mind split between panic and disbelief. The world around me had no towers, no roads, not even smoke from a distant chimney. Only forests that stretched forever, rivers roaring without bridges, and mountains whose peaks glared white in the distance. My heart slammed hard in my ribs as the truth dawned. This was no wilderness hike. I had been thrown, no, exiled, into the very dawn of humanity. A Stone Age world. My tongue cracked with thirst, my stomach churned with hunger, and my skin itched from insect bites. Every breath tasted of soil and danger. The last thing I remember on Earth was pulling an all-nighter, reviewing iron smelting processes for a project. Then a sudden crash, darkness, and now, this nightmare. I wanted to scream, but the sound would only bring predators. I pushed myself up with trembling arms, staring at my frail body. My clothes had been reduced to tatters. My shoes were gone, replaced by cuts on my feet. The air was colder than I expected, and already I could see clouds of my breath rising like ghostly wisps. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me. How could a lone man survive here with nothing but his modern mind? But then, something flickered before my eyes. A panel, glowing faintly blue, as if projected from deep within my skull. Words appeared. Survival system initiated. Host, Liwan. Occupation, engineer. Era, primitive Stone Age. Goal, establish clan. Rule as first king. Condition, forge fire, forge iron, forge legacy. Lifespan, 30 days remaining. My pulse stopped. 30 days? My life was already burning down like a candle stub. The only way to extend it was clear: build, grow, forge. For the first time since I woke up, my despair twisted into something else. Determination. If the gods, or whatever power had dragged me here, wanted to see whether a lone engineer could rise in a savage world, then so be it. I clenched my jaw and forced my numb legs to move. I had only 30 days to find food, make fire, and carve a place for myself before this land consumed me. The first step to survival was fire. That much even the most primitive tribes must have known, and I knew it with a certainty born of lectures, textbooks, and every story of humanity's first leap forward. Without fire, there would be no warmth in the night, no protection against beasts, no clean water, no cooked food. My breath came ragged as I scanned the ground. The forest nearby looked dark and unwelcoming, but it was my only source of wood. My engineering mind began to tick, cataloging what was available. Stone underfoot, brittle grass, dry twigs near the roots of trees, and my own 2 hands. My palms bled after the first dozen attempts at striking stones together, sparks that fizzled out as soon as they were born. I cursed under my breath, but then the survival panel shimmered again, offering a faint prompt. Basic craft unlocked. Stone tools. Requirement: sharp-edged rock. Reward: durability +1, fire chance +20%. My gaze darted to the riverbed, and sure enough, shards of flint-like stone jutted from the sand. It was eerie. This system seemed to guide me just enough, but it didn't hand me victory. I pried one stone free, sharp as a broken blade, and began striking again. This time sparks jumped more eagerly, and when I gathered a bundle of dried grass and blew carefully, smoke curled upward, followed by a tiny flame. My chest filled with something close to awe. Fire. My fire. The crackling warmth against my frozen skin felt like life itself. For the first time since awakening, I laughed, not a mad laugh of despair, but a raw, triumphant bark. But hunger came swiftly after joy, gnawing at my insides until my knees shook. Fire would not feed me. I scanned the forest edge and saw shadows moving. Rabbits? No, too large. Deer. My stomach twisted with longing, but I was no hunter. Not yet. I tore a long branch from a nearby sapling, hardened the tip in the fire, and fashioned the most basic of spears. My system remained silent, as if testing whether I would apply what I knew. And I did. I remembered every documentary, every tribal account I had ever read. Stalk low, mask your scent, use terrain. Hours passed as I crept closer, heart hammering like a drum. When I lunged, my spear struck only air, the deer bounding away in terror. My body crumpled with exhaustion. I lay there in the dirt, empty-handed, my fire flickering in the distance. And yet, as the stars rose over the forest canopy, my resolve hardened. If one deer escaped today, another would fall tomorrow. My system had given me 30 days, but my mind gave me the rest, knowledge of iron, steel, and the tools that could turn stone into empire. I whispered into the night, "If this is the Stone Age, then I will drag it forward with me." The fire hissed in answer, sparks leaping skyward like stars, as if the world itself had heard my vow. The night was cruel in ways I could never have imagined. Even with the fire at my side, the darkness pressed in like a living thing, filled with rustles, screeches, and the low growls of predators circling just beyond the glow. I kept feeding the flames with broken branches, terrified it might die, because the moment it did, I knew I would follow. My spear lay across my lap, crude and fragile, but it was the only barrier between me and the unseen eyes watching from the trees. Sleep came in fractured bursts, every snapping twig jolting me awake, every gust of wind carrying the stench of damp fur and wild blood. My body begged for rest, yet my mind spun ceaselessly, trying to calculate, to plan, to find structure in this savage chaos. The engineer in me refused to surrender. At dawn, when the first light cracked the horizon, I was still alive. My throat was parched, my stomach a hollow drum, but I had endured, and the system seemed to recognize it, for new text appeared before me. Survival milestone reached, first night endured. Lifespan extended plus 5 days. New talent acquired, primitive engineering instinct. Description: host gains accelerated insight when crafting tools or structures, adapting faster than ordinary humans. My heart raced. 5 days, earned just for clinging to life. And that new talent, it felt like a fire igniting inside my brain. Already I could see the weaknesses in my spear shaft, the inefficiency of my fire pit, the wasted effort of my shelterless night. Ideas poured in like water through broken dams. Build a lean-to using river reeds, shape sharper cutting stones, weave grass rope for binding. I staggered to my feet, my hunger gnawing, but hope pushing me onward. At the river, I cupped water in my hands, half afraid it might poison me, but the system flashed. Safe spring source identified. Hydration restored. Relief almost broke me. I drank until my belly sloshed, then searched the shoreline for edible roots. Some were bitter, others made me gag, but a few passed the system's silent judgment, their aftertaste earthy but survivable. It wasn't much, yet it was food, and as I gnawed on them, my thoughts drifted forward again. Fire, water, food, bare survival. The next step had to be tools. Real tools. Stone axes to cut wood, hammers to shape, something more than this sharpened stick. The sooner I began building, the sooner I could move beyond fear. Because I'd seen the system's words clearly. Forge iron. Forge legacy. That meant my path was already chosen. The only question was how many battles I could win before 30 days, or some predator, ended me. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the river rocks hot enough to burn my bare feet. I worked regardless, driven by the pounding urgency of hunger and the cold shadow of that 30-day limit hovering over my life. The new talent, primitive engineering instinct, was like having my brain wired to every survival trick in existence, but supercharged with clarity I never possessed on Earth. Every rock I lifted, every branch I stripped, seemed to reveal hidden patterns of use. I selected a flat, heavy stone for a hammer, then found a narrow shard sharp enough to cut like a knife. Binding them together with twisted reeds, I fashioned a crude hand axe. When I tested it against a branch, the wood splintered faster than I expected, sparks of satisfaction igniting in my chest. My hands bled, my muscles screamed, but the results spurred me on. By evening, I had crafted not just one axe, but also a scraping tool for hides I did not yet have, and a pointed hammerstone that could chip flake from larger rocks. My camp, which yesterday had been nothing more than a fire circle, now bore the beginnings of shelter. A frame of bent branches lashed together, covered with grass thatched into overlapping layers, gave me shade and the promise of warmth tonight. It was pitiful by modern standards, but in this world, it felt like I had raised a fortress. The system pulsed again, rewarding my progress. Basic shelter achieved. Host receives plus 10 health, plus 2 strength. Lifespan plus 3 days. 3 more days. A laugh escaped me, hoarse but triumphant. This world was cruel, yet not without order. Every step forward gave me more time, more tools, more hope. But survival was not a straight road. It demanded risk. My stomach had shrunk to a hollow pit. Roots could only take me so far. Meat would give me strength, and bones could be carved into needles or hooks. My gaze swept the river, where fish darted beneath the current. Spears had failed me, but traps I could build. I cut branches into stakes and fashioned a crude fish weir in the shallows, guiding the current into a narrow funnel. Hours later, as dusk stained the river crimson, I caught my first trembling silver fish, its body flashing in the fading light. Roasting it over the fire, the oily smell nearly drove me insane. When I bit into the flesh, tears welled unbidden in my eyes. It was not the taste of fish, it was the taste of survival, of proof that I could take from this world what I needed to live. That night, under a sky bursting with stars, I sat by my fire with a full belly and a roof over my head, whispering a promise to the dark forest beyond. I will not die here as prey. I will rise here as something greater. The 5th day began with a strange quiet. The forest, usually alive with bird calls and the chatter of unseen animals, seemed to hold its breath. I woke stiff and sore beneath my thatched shelter, the embers of my fire still glowing faintly. Hunger already gnawed, though the memory of roasted fish gave me determination to expand my methods. A single fish or root was survival, but not enough to build the strength I needed. The system's words burned in my skull. Forge iron. Forge legacy. Iron. Impossible without fire hot enough for smelting, without furnaces, without ores. But my engineering mind refused to dismiss the thought. Everything had a beginning. Humans had dragged themselves from this same dirt once before, and now I carried that ancient knowledge like a torch. I decided the next step was to prepare for bigger prey. I reshaped my spear, binding the point with tighter lashings, even carving barbs along its side with my new hand axe. Each improvement seemed obvious, as if my hands remembered what my mind commanded. Yet I could not ignore the feeling that I was not entirely alone here. Tracks in the mud near the riverbank suggested others had walked this land. Too large for deer, too straight for beasts. Bare feet, human-sized but wider, heavier, perhaps belonging to a primitive tribe. My pulse quickened at the thought. People meant danger. People also meant opportunity. A clanless man in the Stone Age was as good as dead. Tribes hunted together, shared food, passed on fire. But they also fought savagely, spilling blood over territory and resources. I crouched over the prints, tracing them with trembling fingers when the system flickered once more. First contact approaches. Branching fate, ally or enemy. Prepare. My mouth went dry. The forest no longer felt like empty wilderness. It was a stage, and unseen eyes might already be watching me. I returned to camp, strengthening the shelter walls, sharpening more stakes to form a crude palisade around my fire. I worked feverishly until sweat drenched me, until my hands blistered again, because fear gave me no choice. Night fell too quickly, and with it came the distant, eerie sound of drums echoing from the trees. My heart slammed. Drums meant rhythm, and rhythm meant men. Somewhere out there, in the black tangle of forest, a tribe was moving. My fire crackled, casting long shadows on the ground, and for the first time, I wondered whether its light guided me or betrayed me. I gripped my spear tight, forcing my breath to steady, whispering to myself that an engineer's mind was more dangerous than any savage's club. Still, as the drums faded into the night, I understood one thing. Survival would not be against beasts alone. Humanity itself was hunting me now. The following morning, I woke with my spear still clutched in white-knuckled fists, my ears straining for every sound. The drums from the night before still echoed in my memory, a rhythm that throbbed with both threat and promise. My fire had burned low, leaving only smoldering coals, and the forest seemed unsettled, restless, as though it too had heard the alien beat. I forced myself into motion because idleness meant death. My engineering instinct pushed me toward preparation, stronger weapons, smarter defenses. I cut down thicker branches with my axe, shaping them into spear shafts as tall as myself, their points hardened in the flames. Using vines as cordage, I began weaving a crude net. Primitive, yes, but effective enough to entangle an animal or even a man if fortune smiled. Every movement bled sweat and blood from me, but my hunger drove me forward. I needed more food, more firewood, more weapons. By midday, I had set snares for rabbits and rebuilt the fish weir, but my mind never left the human tracks by the river. Who were they? Savages with painted faces and bone clubs? Or proto-tribesmen who might understand fire, language, and trade? The system offered no answers, only flickering words. First contact imminent. Prepare clan option. Submission, resistance, or leadership. My chest tightened. Leadership? How could a lone, starving man lead anyone? Yet even as I doubted, something in my blood stirred. A primal urge, the seed of kingship perhaps, buried beneath the fear. That night, as I sat gnawing on roasted roots, the answer came not as a vision, but as reality. Shadows moved at the edge of the firelight. Figures, crouched and wary, their bodies lean and wrapped in furs, eyes reflecting the flames like predators. There were 5 of them, men painted with streaks of ash, carrying spears tipped with sharpened bone. They spoke in guttural tones, words I did not know, yet their intent was clear. They wanted to see if I was prey or rival. I rose slowly, heart hammering, raising my spear without aggression, but without submission either. The tallest among them stepped forward, scar cutting across his cheek, and pointed at my fire with a hunger that mirrored my own. Fire. They had seen what I had created, and now they wanted it. My system pulsed. Critical choice, share fire, ally path, defend fire, enemy path, dominate fire, leadership path. My grip tightened. This was no longer about survival alone. It was about power. For in this world, whoever commanded fire commanded life. The air between us tightened, as though the forest itself held its breath to witness the outcome. 5 pairs of eyes glowed in the firelight, filled with hunger and suspicion. My spear felt heavy, yet my mind was sharp, running through possibilities like gears in a hidden machine. If I surrendered the fire, they would see me as weak, no better than prey. If I fought, I might kill one, but their numbers would overwhelm me. My small shelter and sharpened sticks would not stand against a tribe. No, this was an equation of dominance, of perception, of leverage. The system's words echoed like thunder. Dominate fire. I straightened, lifted a branch blazing with flame, and thrust it high, the sparks scattering across the night like stars. The tribesmen flinched, all momentarily breaking through their grim faces. Fire to them was not just heat, it was spirit god power. My voice rang out, loud and commanding, though I knew they did not understand my words. This flame is mine. Bow to it, or burn before it. My throat ached, but the tone carried authority, the raw timbre of leadership. The scarred man snarled, baring teeth, but he hesitated. That hesitation was everything. I drove the flaming branch into the earth, letting the fire roar higher, feeding it with more wood until it blazed like a beacon. Then I stepped forward, meeting his gaze without fear, showing him the iron edge of resolve, even if I had no iron yet. The silence broke as one of the younger men dropped to a knee, pressing his forehead to the dirt. Submission. Another followed, uncertain, then another, until only the scarred leader remained standing. His chest heaved, his spear lifted, then lowered. Slowly, grudgingly, he bent his head. My pulse thundered in my ears. It was done. I had not fought them, yet I had conquered them. The system pulsed with blinding clarity. Clan seed established. Path, leadership, new trait unlocked. Command aura I. My breath hitched. These savages had become the roots of something greater. A clan, not yet strong, not yet loyal, but mine to shape. The scarred one rose and barked words in their rough tongue, gesturing toward the forest. They wanted me to follow, to see their camp, perhaps to test me further. I tightened my grip on my spear, glancing once at my flickering shelter. Alone, I had fire. With them, I might have numbers, strength, and future iron. I stepped forward. If this were the Stone Age, then tonight was the first night of a kingdom. The forest swallowed us as we moved, their strides silent and assured, mine cautious but unyielding. The night air smelled of smoke and damp earth, the firelight behind me fading until only the faint glow of torches ahead guided the way. I counted every step, every gesture of the tribesmen, storing knowledge like a ledger in my mind. These men carried themselves with a wild discipline, their bodies scarred not by accident, but by ritual and battle. They did not speak much, only short bursts of guttural sounds, though I felt their eyes flicker toward me often, weighing my worth. Soon the trees opened into a clearing where raw humanity lived in its most primal form. The tribe's camp was a circle of crude huts woven from reeds and mud, smoke rising in thin threads from central fire pits. Women crouched near embers, gnawing bones or grinding roots on flat stones. Children, thin and wary, peeked from behind hides, their eyes shining in the glow. At the heart of it all was a massive fire, larger than mine by far, though dimmer, smoldering as though in exhaustion. My breath caught. Fire was sacred here, their center of gravity, yet lacked the ferocity of mine. That alone gave me confidence. The scarred leader barked a command, and the tribe stirred, gathering like wolves around prey. Spears lowered, eyes gleamed. I realized then I was not invited as a guest, but as a challenge. This was a trial, a test of whether the fire I carried was strong enough to burn within their circle. My instinct urged caution, but the system's pulse rang through my skull. Clan integration event triggered. Prove worth. Options: display craft, display fire, display hunt. My gaze swept over the camp. Their tools were crude, stones barely sharpened, wood splintering at the tips of spears, baskets unraveling. Their fire was smothered, poorly tended. My engineering mind surged with possibilities. I could show them fire's true strength, ignite their pit into a roaring blaze. Or I could craft before their eyes, shape wood and stone into tools superior to theirs. Or risk everything by leading a hunt, returning with meat their bellies craved. My hand clenched around the haft of my spear, then loosened as an idea struck. Why choose only one? Leadership was not proving a single talent. It was proving that my fire, my craft, my mind all surpassed theirs. Slowly, I stepped forward to their dying hearth, crouched, and with deliberate calm, used dry fibers from my pouch, striking sparks with flint I'd carried. The flames caught instantly, devouring the tinder, roaring upward as if alive. Gasps rippled through the circle. Then I lifted a stone axe I had fashioned and split kindling with swift precision, stacking it like a lattice to feed the blaze with structure, not chaos. The fire surged brighter than any they had seen. For a moment, silence fell heavy. Then murmurs rose, awed, fearful. I turned, meeting their gazes, and in that moment, I was no longer an outsider. I was firebringer, toolmaker, something greater. The scarred leader's face twisted with pride and unease, his power slipping even as the fire rose. I knew then. I had planted a seed not just of survival, but of dominion. The Stone Age had its first spark of rule. The blaze roared higher, its light painting the tribe's faces in gold and shadow. Children gasped, women murmured, and even the hardened hunters leaned back as if the fire itself had grown teeth. I stood before it, breathing deep, chest rising with a rhythm that was half fear, half exhilaration. This was not just survival anymore. This was theater demonstration, power woven into spectacle. The scarred leader barked something sharp, his tone laced with challenge, and he stepped close enough that his breath, hot and acrid, brushed my face. His eyes demanded proof beyond sparks. The tribe did not bow for light alone. They bowed for strength, for sustenance, for the promise of tomorrow. My system shimmered. Next step required. Prove fire feeds life. Prove fire hunts. Prove fire shapes. My jaw tightened. A choice again, but this time I felt it clearer. To rule, I could not show a single edge. I must wield many. I dropped to one knee beside the flames, retrieved a fish from my pouch, and speared it clean through. With slow, deliberate care, I roasted it over the fire, letting its oils sizzle, the aroma filling the clearing. Hunger struck them immediately. Eyes widened, nostrils flared. They had fire, yes, but not mastery, not this control. When the skin crackled, I tore a piece free, lifted it high, then tasted it with deliberate calm. The flavor, smoky and rich, nearly made me moan, but I held my expression stern, sharing none with them. I wanted their hunger to grow, their desire to sharpen into awe. Murmurs rippled. One child whimpered. Only then did I cast a scrap of roasted flesh toward them. A boy darted forward, snatched it, and shoved it into his mouth. The look in his eyes when he tasted cooked food was worship itself. That single glance spread through the circle like a spark leaping from tinder. They saw me not just as a firebringer, but as one who made fire serve men. The scarred leader growled, frustrated, his authority bleeding into the dirt beneath his feet. He snatched a spear from a tribesman, thrust it into my hands, and pointed toward the forest with a savage jab. The meaning was clear: hunt. I could craft, and I could cook, but could I take life from the wild? My fingers curled tight around the weapon. Fear quivered in my gut, but alongside it was something else: anticipation. I nodded once, sharp and firm, and strode toward the trees. The system flared. Trial hunt initiated. Outcome will determine clan authority. Prey, unknown. Reward, loyalty/death. Behind me, the fire crackled like an oath. Ahead of me, darkness yawned wide, hiding teeth and eyes. If the stone age demanded blood, then blood it would taste. I would hunt, not as prey, but as king in the making. The forest swallowed me whole. Every step was a negotiation with roots, shadows, and the silent press of watching eyes. The scarred leader and 2 hunters flanked me, their steps predatory, testing if I would falter. I did not. The spear in my hand was crude, heavy at the tip, yet I held it firm as though it were forged iron. The system's hum guided me, whispering of angles, of sound, of tension in the earth. A rustle stirred in the brush ahead, low and dangerous. My eyes narrowed, bore. Thick-shouldered, tusked, furious. To the tribe, this beast was both meat and death. Many hunters bore scars carved by its rage. The scarred leader grinned, cruel delight flashing in his teeth. This was no test for survival. This was an execution. If I failed, they would feast on my corpse instead. The boar charged, its squeal splitting the night. My heart hammered, but my mind, sharpened by Earth's knowledge, sliced through the panic. A beast is momentum. A beast is weight. Turn weight against itself. At the last moment, I shifted, driving the spear, but into the earth at an angle, bracing with all my strength. The boar impaled itself, screaming, thrashing, snapping the shaft in half. Pain burst through my arms, but I leapt forward, seizing the jagged wood, driving it deeper into its chest. Blood sprayed hot against my face, iron scent thick in the air. The beast collapsed, twitching then stilled. My breath roared in my ears. Around me, silence. Then, a chorus of cries, guttural and raw, as the hunters pounded their chests, howling approval. The scarred leader scowled, but even he could not hide the awe glinting in his eyes. I dragged the boar by its tusks, hauling it back toward the campfire, muscles screaming but will unbroken. The flames welcomed me like a throne's glow, casting my shadow long across the circle of tribesmen. Children shrieked with glee. Women covered their mouths in astonishment. I dropped the beast at the fire's edge, lifted my blood-stained hands to the sky, and roared, not in their tongue, but in the universal language of dominance. The response shook the night. They howled with me, stamping their feet, surrendering their hearts to the hunter who turned fire into food and beasts into offerings. The system's voice thundered. Trial hunt completed. Clan loyalty increased. Trait evolved. Command aura 2. Subtrait gained. Fearless presence. My chest swelled. I was no longer simply Liwan, the lost engineer. I was becoming something greater. A chieftain, a root for which a tree would rise. As the tribe tore into roasted boar under my watchful gaze, I sat apart, sharpening broken spearwood into new tools, already thinking of kills, furnaces, and iron yet to be born. Tonight, in the flicker of Stone Age fire, the First Kingdom was no longer a dream but a seed, and I would water it with blood, sweat, and the will to rule. The night after the boar hunt, I barely slept. My body lay exhausted on a mat of furs they had offered me, but my mind churned like a forged bellows. Around me, the tribe slept soundly, bellies filled, the fire still smoldering. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw not flames, but iron. Iron nails, iron plows, iron blades that would make wooden spears look like toys. If fire had given me dominance tonight, iron would make me untouchable tomorrow. The system pulsed faintly, as if in response. Vision path unlocked. Forge of ages. Requirement. Knowledge. Material. Fire control. I sat up, staring into the coals. Stone Age fire was crude, good for meat and warmth, but not yet worthy of transformation. I needed heat, more heat than a bonfire could give. I recalled every engineering manual, every childhood diagram of smelting and bloomery furnaces I had memorized back on Earth. Clay, stone, airflow. Even here, in the primitive dark, I had the foundation to leap ahead of millennia. The thought made my blood burn hotter than the flames. At dawn, when the tribe stirred, I did not boast or rest on the victory of the boar. I worked. I gathered stones, dug into the riverbank for clay, stripped bark for binding fibers. The women watched curiously. The children followed me like ducklings. The scarred leader sneered, muttering words I could not yet translate, but the others grew more silent with each stroke of my labor. I built a pit, lined it with clay, and shaped a chimney with stacked stone. Crude, yes, but the skeleton of a furnace. With each movement, I imagined the sparks, the glow of molten metal. At night, when the tribe feasted again on roasted meat, I fed my small furnace with charcoal I had painstakingly crafted by burying burning wood under soil. The smoke rose thick, choking, but the system shimmered. Primitive furnace created. Efficiency low. Skill path. Metallurgy, locked until or obtained. A spark of triumph surged in my chest. I had not yet made iron, but I had laid the first brick of empire. Around the fire, the scarred leader glared at me, his pride gnawed raw. He had hunted, fought, led for years, but never had he bent fire into a shape of his own will. The tribe murmured at my creation, curiosity tilting toward awe. Tonight, I had shown them fire's teeth. Tomorrow, I will show them its bones, iron bones. And from those bones, a kingdom would rise. Food was power, nearly as great as fire itself. I learned this quickly as days passed within the tribe. Every mouthful of roasted meat or cooked root turned wary glances into softer eyes, every shared scrap binding them closer to me. When the hunters returned with game, I stepped forward not as beggar, but as provider, cutting, roasting, seasoning with salt I had scraped from dried riverbeds. They tasted flavors unknown to them, and in their silence, I felt respect bloom. Still, food alone could not secure my place. Words were bridges, and without language, I was an island among them. Each night by the fire, I pointed to things, stone, tree, sky, and repeated the sounds they made, my tongue clumsy, their laughter sharp at first. Yet children were patient, women curious, and even the grizzled men began correcting me when I erred. Slowly, syllables became threads, weaving me into their world. I learned their name for fire, Ka. For meat, Drew. For mon, Thur. And one night, the scarred leader's name slipped from the crowd, Hrak. Knowing his name gave me a weapon sharper than any spear. Still, Hrak was no fool. He tested me at every turn, setting challenges I could not decline. One day, he ordered me to carry water until my back ached raw. Another, he thrust me into a hunt alone, hoping the forest would finish what his envy could not. But each trial only sharpened me further. The system whispered at every victory. Trait strengthened, endurance. New skill, linguistic adaptation. What began as stammering words soon shaped into crude sentences. I could ask for food, for tools, for help. I could command, not with gestures, but with tongue. And when I began calling children by name, when I addressed elders with their own words, the tribe's laughter shifted to pride. I was not only firebringer, I was kin, shaping myself into their bloodline. Each bond stitched tighter the fragile fabric of loyalty. Food fed their bellies. Words fed their trust, and in both I carved my place as more than stranger. I was becoming chieftain not by decree, but by proof, woven into their lives thread by thread. By the third week, the tribe's trust was no longer fragile. It was pliable, ready to be shaped. I saw it in the way the women gathered near my fire, the way the children followed at my heels, and even in the men's grudging acceptance when I divided roasted meat with fairness. Yet trust without structure was sand slipping through fingers. A clan needed order, work shared, hands directed. One morning, as mist curled low across the huts of woven grass and hides, I stood in the center of camp and raised my hands. Shelter, I said in their tongue, pointing at their crude homes. Better, stronger. Confusion stirred, but curiosity held them still. I motioned for men and women alike to gather logs, clay, stone. Hrak sneered, but the others moved, drawn by something deeper than command, by vision. I dug trenches, lined them with clay to keep out rain, showed them how logs interlocked for walls instead of leaning haphazard. With vines and mud, I sealed gaps. With flat stones, I raised hearts that trapped warmth instead of letting it vanish into the night. The system pulsed. Primitive architecture unlocked. Clan defense increased. Comfort increased. Loyalty +2. The change was immediate. That night, as winds howled, their new shelters stood firm while the old ones rattled like bones. Mothers clutched children and whispered my name. Hrak spat in the dirt, but even his hut now stood sturdier because of my hands. It was not just walls I was raising. It was precedent, proof that work guided by mind outweighed work guided by instinct. And once they saw it with their own eyes, they obeyed with fewer questions. From shelters, I turned them toward labor for the forge. I had them gather river stones for lining, dig deeper pits, collect hardwoods to char into cleaner fuel. I taught them to pile earth over burning logs, leaving only narrow vents, so the fire smoldered and birthed black charcoal instead of wasted ash. The first time I showed them the glossy black lumps, harder and lighter than wood, they stared in wonder. They did not yet understand what I intended, but they followed, for following had already given them warmth and safety. Leadership, I realized, was not about the whip. It was about the vision to make men move where they would not have walked. And slowly, this tribe of hunters began to walk the path of builders. The day I chose to hunt or dawned with the sky streaked in pale red, the sun breaking like molten metal across the horizon. I rose before the tribe, spear in hand, not for beasts this time, but for stone. Or iron seed, hid in veins and boulders, waiting to be claimed. Without it, my furnace was nothing but an empty promise. I called for volunteers, speaking in their rough tongue, pointing to myself and the hills. Stone, strong, new fire. Confusion flickered, but curiosity and loyalty drew a small band to my side. 2 young hunters, eager for adventure. An older woman, strong-backed, carrying woven baskets. And, surprisingly, a boy barely past 10 summers, his eyes sharp with hunger for knowledge. Hrak watched us leave with narrowed eyes. muttering something that made a few men laugh cruelly. Let him sneer. When I returned with, or, it would be his silence that fed me. We traveled through the forest, my system whispering faintly with each step. Or prospecting activated. Range short, sensitivity low. My vision seemed to sharpen, pulling toward rocks with a faint shimmer, not of light but of potential. Near a stream, I stopped, kneeling by a cluster of reddish stones. My fingers brushed the surface, rough, dense, streaked with iron oxide. Hematite, crude, but workable. I struck it with another stone, and when sparks leapt, the boy gasped, eyes wide as moons. Firestone, I told them in their tongue, lifting it high. Their murmurs spread like ripples across water. We gathered as much as we could carry, baskets groaning under the weight. The hunters grumbled, and used to labor beyond killing, but I reminded them with roasted meat promised upon return, and they pressed on. By midday, sweat streaked our backs, and we rested by the stream. I crouched with the boy, showing him how the stones left streaks of red dust when rubbed on flat rock. Blood of earth, I said, making the words simple, and his mouth shaped them after me. I saw in his gaze not just loyalty, but spark, an apprentice, perhaps the first true student of my vision. When we returned to camp, the tribe gathered, eyes wide at the strange, heavy stones. Crack barked laughter, mocking, calling them dead rocks. But when I piled them by the furnace, when I fed charcoal and fire until the pit roared hotter than any campfire, even his laughter thinned. The system flickered, or acquired. Smelting attempt possible. Success chance, 12%. Failure consequence, loyalty loss. My palms itched with sweat, but I felt no fear. Every great leap began with risk. That night, under stars sharp as blades, I prepared to light the forge, not just with fire, but with history itself. The furnace roared like a beast caged in stone, its breath a hot wind that pushed sweat down my spine and blurred my vision with heat shimmer. The tribe gathered in a wide circle, murmurs buzzing like insects, their eyes reflecting firelight as though they themselves were sparks waiting to leap. The baskets of or lay beside me, their reddish surfaces dull compared to the flames. Crack stood at the back, arms crossed, lips curled in a sneer that begged for failure. My hands shook as I lifted the first stone. The system's warning still pulsed at the edge of my sight. Smelting attempt. Success chance, 12%. Failure may result in humiliation. But history was not built by safe choices. I dropped the stone into the heart of the fire, buried it under layers of glowing charcoal, and pumped the crude bellows I had fashioned from hide and wood. The air roared into the pit, feeding the flames until they grew white-hot, a brilliance that made the tribe gasp and shield their eyes. Hours bled away as I labored, muscles screaming, lungs burning from smoke. Every beat of the bellows was a gamble, every crackle a whisper of doubt. Had I misremembered the furnace's design? Would the heat fail to reach iron's stubborn melting point? Still, I pushed on, teeth clenched, until the night deepened and the stars wheeled above. Then at last a glow different from fire flickered at the bottom of the pit. A molten bloom, not liquid yet, but softened, malleable. My heart leapt. With tongs of wood, I pulled the mass free, a glowing clump of slag and metal fused together. The crowd hushed, breathless. I raised a hammerstone and struck. Sparks burst, the sound ringing sharp in the night. Again I struck, and again, breaking away brittle rock until within the slag's shell a dark lump shone, a crude piece of iron. Not perfect, not pure, but iron nonetheless. The tribe erupted into cries, half awe, half fear. Children clung to their mothers. Men stepped forward, staring wide-eyed at the impossible. Crack's face twisted, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. I lifted the lump high, my arms trembling not from weakness but from triumph. New fire, I declared in their tongue. Fire of stone, fire that shapes. The system thundered. First smelt complete. Metallurgy path unlocked. Trait, blacksmith's instinct I. Clan loyalty +5. Fear of Hrack -2. My breath came ragged, but my spirit soared. In the glow of that crude iron, I saw more than metal. I saw plows that would feed hundreds, blades that would win battles, nails that would raise fortresses. Tonight, I had stolen the secret of the gods and placed it into mortal hands. The Stone Age had ended for this tribe. The Age of Iron had begun, and I would be its first king. The tribe's cheers still echoed in the night when I saw it. The flicker of hatred in Hrak's eyes, a shadow darker than the firelight could chase away. His jaw worked as though chewing stone, muscles twitching beneath his scarred skin. For all his strength, for all his dominance, he was no longer the sun around which the others orbited. Tonight, their eyes had shifted, their whispers carried my name, their awe bent not toward a club, but toward the strange black lump glowing in my hands. He hit it well at first, joining the celebration with forced shouts, clapping men on the shoulder, but I saw through it. Every gesture was a coil, every smile a blade. When the tribe slept, when the fire burned low, I caught him slipping away, two of his closest hunters at his side, their shadows long against the stone walls. I followed from a distance, heart steady, hand brushing the crude dagger I had forged from sharpened stone. The wilderness swallowed them quickly, moonlight turning the ground into silver sand. I crouched behind boulders, watching. Their voices carried faintly, harsh and low. "He is not of us," Hrak snarled, striking the earth with his spear. "His fire is demon's trick. If we let him rise, the tribe will forget me. They will bow to him." One of the hunters murmured agreement, the other hesitated. Hrak's voice grew colder, like flint grinding. "Then we break him. Next smelt, we scatter the fire. Next hunt, we make sure beast claws find his back. And if he survives, then my spear finds his heart when no one watches." My fists clenched. The system flickered. Threat detected. Loyalty of tribe split. 60% you, 35% Hrak, 5% neutral. Path of power demands choice. Confront openly or undermine quietly. A choice already? My gut twisted. To act too soon might splinter the tribe, but to wait was to invite a knife in the dark. Still, as I crouched there, the ember of iron in my pouch seemed to pulse with heat, a reminder that power meant risk, and kingship was never given. It was taken claw by claw, strike by strike. For now, I returned silently, the knowledge heavy in my chest. Tomorrow, Hrak would smile at me with teeth bared, pretending to be an ally, but I would see the wolf beneath. And when his hand moved to strike, I would already be waiting. The dawn after my first smelt rose blood red, as though the sky itself knew the taste of conflict. I sat apart from the tribe, the crude iron lump still cooling beside me, its weight both promise and threat. Hrak's muttered conspiracy replayed in my mind, sharper than any blade. If I struck too soon, I risked shattering the fragile order I'd built. Fear could scatter the tribe like birds startled from tree. But if I did nothing, Hrak's spear would one day find my back. The system hovered quiet now, yet the earlier choice still pulsed faintly at the edges of my vision, waiting. I thought of tools, of leverage, of survival in both wilderness and politics. Kingship wasn't built on strength alone, it was built on structure. So I chose, not to confront him openly yet, but to weave a web that would leave him stranded and alone when he tried to strike. My first step was food. No tribe could resist full bellies, and already my mind churned with ways to stretch the hunt, to turn harvest into plenty. With the help of two youths eager to follow me, I guided the tribe into building small pit traps lined with sharpened stakes, designed with the precision of my engineer's memory. When the first wild boar fell, thrashing until its blood ran black into the earth, the tribe feasted for 2 days. I stood at the center of the fire, not boasting, not flaunting, but letting their eyes turn to me each time a mouthful passed their lips. "One gives us meat," I heard whispered. "One gives us fire." The next step was shelter. I gathered stones, binding them with mud and clay, shaping walls taller and sturdier than the windbreaks they had known. Families slept warmer, safer. Mothers looked at me differently, not with lust, but with a fierce gratitude that carved its own kind of loyalty. All the while, I watched Hrak, watched his frustration grow as the murmur spread. He still strutted, still barked orders, But the responses came slower now, less obedient. He could not challenge me yet. Not with the tribe's bellies full, their beds dry, their eyes shining with iron's new mystery. And so I set the third step of my trap, teaching language. I began with the children, patient in their curiosity, showing them simple signs for numbers, marks scratched in dirt that held meaning beyond sound. They laughed, but they remembered, and their parents noticed. It was slow, invisible power, the kind Rack's club could never break. By the time he moved against me, his hand would find nothing to grip, his shouts echoing hollow, his followers already mine. Yet as I lay under the stars that night, I knew the day would come soon when subtlety would no longer shield me. He would not tolerate me forever. The question was no longer whether we would clash, it was when, and who would stand with me when the first blood fell. The hunt began with clear skies, the air crisp with the promise of prey. I had led a party of 10 into the forest, marking trails with careful notches, guiding them toward a valley where wild deer often gathered. Spirits are high, bellies were full from recent feasts, and the tribe's trust in me grew with every step. Yet beneath it all, I felt the weight of Hrak's gaze, a heavy shadow pressing against my back. He strode with spear in hand, his movements loud, deliberate, as though daring me to call him out. I ignored it, focusing instead on the terrain, the wind's direction, the signs of hoofprints in the soft soil. Hours passed, and finally we sighted them. A small herd grazing near a stream, antlers glinting like pale crowns in the sun. I crouched low, signaling the others to fan out, to circle carefully. We moved like hunters should, silent and precise, except Hrak. At the critical moment, just as we readied to strike, a sharp snap shattered the air. A branch under his foot, broken far too carelessly, far too loudly. The deer bolted, leaping into the undergrowth, gone in a heartbeat. Shouts rose, curses flew, and all eyes turned to him. "Clumsy," spat one of the younger hunters. Hrak's jaw tightened. He glared at me, daring me to accuse him, but I said nothing. I would not give him the satisfaction of an open quarrel here. Instead, I simply turned, scanning, recalculating, searching for a second chance. And fate delivered. A lone stag had not run far, lingering by the stream's bend. Emotion for silence, for patience. This time, I led the strike myself. The spear I carried, its tip hardened in fire, flew true, driving into the stag's side. It fell, thrashing, and the men roared with triumph. We would not return empty-handed. Yet as I knelt to finish the kill, I caught sight of Hrak again, his fingers brushing the bindings of my spear quiver, loosening them so they might fail next time. Sabotage, done with hands quick and quiet, masked by the celebration around us. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face smooth, calm, betraying nothing. The system flickered, sabotage detected. Spear integrity minus 25%. Leadership challenge increases. A test, then. He was probing, waiting for the day when one failure might turn the tribe against me. Not yet a strike, but the prelude to war. I looked up at the sky, the stag's blood still warm on my hands, and I knew the moment drew nearer when this game of shadows would ignite into flame. The forest echoed with the cries of hunters, but beneath the sound, I heard another note, the growl of a beast waiting in the dark. That night, long after the hunters had returned and the tribe celebrated the stag's meat over the fire, I sat alone in the half-finished forge, staring at my spear. Its bindings were indeed loosened, the lashings at the base of the shaft frayed in ways that only deliberate tampering could explain. I ran my fingers along the wood, feeling the slight give, the hidden betrayal. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself into calm. Anger was a weapon that cut both ways. If I stormed to the elders now, accusing Hrak without proof, he would twist the story, paint me as jealous, paranoid, or weak. No, this battle would not be won with shouting, but with steel. I set about reinforcing the weapons, using the fragments of, or we had smelted, crude, but serviceable. I shaped thin plates to line the spear's tip, securing it with strips of sinew and hide. Each strike of stone against metal echoed through the night, a rhythm of defiance. By dawn, I had a weapon stronger than before, gleaming faintly in the firelight. The system pulsed as though approving. Forged prototype weapon, reinforced spear. Durability plus 50%. Authority plus 2. Small gains, yet meaningful. I tested the balance, thrusting into the air, imagining the moment Hrak tried again. This time, I would not simply defend. I began laying quiet foundations for the inevitable clash. To the younger hunters who lingered near me, eager to learn, I taught subtle lessons. How to twist sinew tighter, how to spot sabotage on tools, how to keep watch over supplies. Each lesson seeded loyalty, trust, a circle of men who would look to me not just for survival, but for leadership. At the same time, I studied Hrak. He prowled at the edges of gatherings, his voice rising in whispers, never shouts. He worked like a wolf testing the herd, searching for weakness. But I had seen wolves before, and I knew the answer was not fear but unity. Still, I dare not move too quickly. One misstep, and the fragile balance of the tribe could shatter. So I played the long game, smiling at feasts, working hard during hunts, letting my progress in the forge speak louder than words. Yet in secret, beneath the cover of night, I practiced with the reinforced spear, setting snares not just for animals, but for men. Hrak thought he had the initiative. Soon, he would learn otherwise. For now, patience was my shield, and iron, true iron, not stone, would be my sword. It happened 3 days later, under the watch of a swollen moon that lit the village like pale fire. The hunt had gone poorly, snares sprung empty, tracks lost in the rain, and murmurs of unease rippled through the tribe. They gathered around the central fire, their faces shadowed and hungry, waiting for words of reassurance. I was ready to speak, to remind them that lean days always came before plenty, when Hrak rose to his feet. His broad chest caught the firelight, scars gleaming like trophies, and his voice rang out sharp as a thrown stone. Why should we trust this stranger's promises? His spear tricks and forged smoke feed no stomachs. He weakens us with his false wisdom while our children starve. The circle stirred, eyes turning from me to him, measuring. I met his gaze steadily, saying nothing, waiting to see his full hand revealed. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward me. You claim to be hunter, builder, leader. Yet I saw your spear bindings frayed, your hunt nearly lost because of your clumsiness. You bring metal that shatters like brittle bone and call it strength. Lies twisted with truth, a poison brewed for the ears of the undecided. A few nodded, doubt gnawing their hearts. Then Hrak raised a spear high. I challenge you, Li Wan, before the eyes of the ancestors and the tribe. If you're fit to lead, prove it. If not, step aside before your weakness kills us all. The circle erupted, some shouting approval, others crying for calm. The elder looked torn, his wrinkled face shadowed with fear of division. My blood ran hot, but my mind was ice. Here it was, the moment I had been preparing for. I rose slowly, deliberate, my reinforced spear glinting faintly, its bindings tight and sure. The fire cast long shadows between us, as though marking the ground for battle. My voice carried, calm but unyielding. Hrak, you say I am weak. Then test me, here and now, not with whispers, not with sabotage, but with strength and skill before all. The tribe hushed, a silence heavy as stone. Children clutched their mothers, men gripped their spears. The elder's voice broke the stillness, solemn and resigned. So be it, a trial of combat. The victor shall hold the right to guide the tribe. And just like that, the night's air thickened with destiny. 2 men, 2 paths, about to clash in the firelight, and only one would walk away bearing the tribe's future. The circle widened, the fire at its heart crackling as though eager to drink blood. Faces loomed in the shadows, 100 eyes fixed on the space where I and Hrak now stood, spears in hand. The elder raised his arm, his voice hoarse but steady. By trial of combat, the tribe shall know its guide. Fight with honor, fight with strength. His hand fell, and in that instant the world narrowed to me and Hrak alone. He lunged first, all brute speed and raw fury, his spear thrusting forward like a boar's tusk meant to pierce through ribs. I twisted aside, the reinforced shaft of my own weapon catching the blow with a sharp crack of wood and metal. Sparks spat from the impact, startling gasps from the onlookers. The system pulsed in my mind. Durability check passed. Reinforced spear integrity stable. My lips tightened in a grim smile. His strike had been meant to shatter me in one blow, to humiliate me before the tribe. But the spear I had forged held firm. Crack snarled, retreating half a step before circling, his broad shoulders rolling like those of a predator denied its kill. He feinted left, then slashed right in a sweeping arc that could have split my skull if it connected. I dropped low, feeling the rush of air graze my hair, before driving my own spear upward in a counterthrust. The tip grazed his side, slicing flesh but not deep enough to slow him. Blood blossomed, and the crowd roared, half in awe, half in fear. He bellowed, fury igniting his face, and came at me again with relentless strikes. Each blow was heavy, hammer-like, forcing me to give ground, to pivot, to trust my reinforced weapon and my quickness. My arms burned, my lungs seared, but I moved with the precision of a man who had learned not in fields of grass, but in classrooms of steel and machines. I let him press, let him think I was faltering, even as my eyes tracked every flaw in his stance, every hitch of breath, every blind spot. The duel was not only of muscle, but of patience. And patience, I reminded myself, was my greatest weapon. The clash of wood and iron echoed like thunder in the night, each strike a contest of life and death. Crack pressed with reckless strength, his muscles bulging, his face twisted in savage determination, but I began to see the rhythm beneath his fury. Every warrior, no matter how wild, moved in patterns, and his were written in blood and arrogance. He favored his right leg, driving forward with overwhelming force, leaving his left flank ever so slightly exposed. I let him chase me, feigning desperation, stumbling back near the fire pit as though cornered. The tribe shouted, half urging him on, half calling for me to rise. Then, in the split second when he lunged again, I shifted sideways, using his momentum against him. My spear shaft slid along his weapon's length, deflecting it wide, and I pivoted sharply, driving the reinforced tip toward his ribs. The strike landed true, piercing flesh. He roared, spittle flying, staggering, but still he did not fall. Instead, he swung his spear but like a club, striking my shoulder and sending a jolt of pain through my arm. I grit my teeth, refusing to yield. Pain was fleeting. Strategy endured. I stepped back, circling, forcing him to follow, each movement drawing him closer to the traps I'd set in my mind. Small dips in the earth, loose stones I had noticed earlier, the uneven ground near the elder's stool. To the untrained, it was just dirt and shadows. To me, it was terrain as vital as the walls of a fortress. Crack lunged again, blind with rage, and his foot caught on a stone. For a fraction of a heartbeat, he faltered. My body moved without hesitation. The reinforced spear thrust forward, glancing off his shoulder, tearing another line of crimson. The tribe gasped, voices rising. Now they saw it. Not luck, but control. I was not just enduring, I was guiding the duel. Every stumble he made was a thread I pulled. Every wound another proof of my strength, not in raw muscle, but in a mind honed by a world of design and precision. The system flickered again, combat advantage secured. Morale più cinque. Ally trust increased. My chest heaved, sweat dripping into my eyes, but my resolve only hardened. This was not just survival. This was the first blueprint of rulership, order against chaos, calculation against brute force. And though he bled, Crack still grinned through his teeth, raising his spear for another charge. He hadn't yet realized that every step he took brought him deeper into the trap I had woven. The air between us burned with heat from the fire and the blood dripping into the earth. Crack no longer attacked like a hunter chasing prey. He struck like a cornered beast, each blow desperate, furious, carrying the weight of his pride. His spear carved arcs that whistled past my face, close enough that I felt the wind kiss my cheek. My reinforced weapon shuddered with every clash, metal grating against hardened wood, sparks leaping like fireflies. I knew the bindings I had crafted were strong, yet still, each impact pushed them closer to breaking, and the system's faint alerts pulsed at the edge of my mind. Integrity 72%. Integrity 65%. A countdown to disaster if I faltered. My arms ached, the bones in my wrists throbbed, but I forced myself to hold, to endure, to answer each strike not with equal power, but with precision. He swung wildly, and I sidestepped, cutting a shallow line across his thigh. He jabbed at my throat, and I angled my spear downward, deflecting, then snapping upward to tear his forearm. His blood sprayed, painting the dirt. Yet he only laughed, his teeth red, eyes wild. "You bleed me, little stranger, but can you kill me?" His voice was a growl, a challenge thrown like a stone. I said nothing, my breath too precious, my focus locked on the rhythm of survival. Then he surged forward, reckless, bringing both hands down in a crushing overhead strike. I braced, catching the blow with my spear, the reinforced tip sparking as it met his weapon. The force drove me to my knees, my back screaming, my muscles shaking as though about to snap. For a heartbeat, the world blurred, the edge of death pressing close. The binding strained, integrity 41%. My mind screamed, "Not yet." With a roar, I twisted, letting his weight carry him past me, and drove the butt of my spear into his chest. The impact knocked him back, breath bursting from his lungs in a choking grunt. He stumbled, coughing blood, yet somehow still did not fall. The crowd cried out, voices torn between fear and awe. I dragged myself to my feet, sweat pouring, every limb trembling, and raised my weapon again. I was still standing. That was enough. The duel was no longer just steel against steel. It was will against will, and mine burned with the fire of a man who refused to die in silence. Crack's chest heaved, his blood soaking through the front of his tunic, yet the fire in his eyes refused to dim. Every strike he delivered carried the weight of desperation, and every parry I executed drained more from my own body. My reinforced spear, once my advantage, now trembled under the relentless assault, with creaking, metal edges sparking with each collision. Integrity 27%, 21%. The system's warnings flickered faintly in my mind like distant thunder, yet instinct and strategy sharpened my senses beyond fear. I circled, baiting him with a feigned stumble, letting the angle of the uneven ground favor me. Crack lunged, muscle and rage propelling him forward, and I twisted my grip, letting his momentum drive him past my line of defense. At that precise instant, I struck. My spear jabbed upward, not at his torso, but beneath his arm, into the softer flesh near his ribs. He roared, stumbling sideways, a hiss of pain escaping his throat. The crowd gasped, some clutching each other, while others leaned forward, eyes wide as though witnessing the impossible. The system pulsed. Critical hit. Crack wounded. Spear integrity minus 15%. My own heart thumped, so loud it seemed the earth shook beneath me. I felt the strain in the shaft, a deep vibration warning that one more reckless blow could shatter the weapon entirely. Yet hesitation was death. The tribe's loyalty, the momentum of leadership, all teetered on this instant. Crack staggered, trying to regain balance, and I pressed, striking in a fluid sequence I had imagined countless times in my mind before ever holding a spear. Parry, pivot, feint, thrust. Each movement precise, each step calculated, exploiting his bloodied weakness while protecting my fragile advantage. Sweat and blood mingled in my hair, vision narrowing to the dance of predator and prey. At last, Crack faltered fully, his spear dropping slightly, exhaustion bleeding into his posture. The system flashed. Combat advantage max chance to end duel. Ha! I knew the moment was mine. One more precise strike could incapacitate him, but it required risking the very spear that had carried me this far. I took a breath, muscles coiled like springs, and surged, driving the reinforced tip deep enough to send Crack crashing to one knee. Pain radiated through the weapon, a warning that it might not endure another clash, but I held firm. The tribe's voices erupted in awe and fear, witnessing the raw power of strategy overcoming sheer strength. The tide had turned. Crack, pride shattered and chest heaving, stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. The duel's momentum now lay entirely in my hands, and with it, the future of the tribe. Crack's legs wavered beneath him, knees scraping the dirt, his chest heaving in ragged gasps. Blood streaked across his face, mixing with sweat and grime. And for the first time, I saw fear, or at least the recognition of inevitable defeat, flicker behind his eyes. The tribe held its collective breath, their murmurs fading into silence as the duel's rhythm slowed, each movement weighted with exhaustion and anticipation. I gripped my reinforced spear tightly, feeling every fiber of sinew and metal strain against the relentless blows it had endured. The system pulsed with quiet satisfaction. Critical combat threshold reached. Leadership authority +10. Crack loyalty full. I pressed forward, not with wild swings, but with controlled strikes designed to dominate without killing, showing mercy while asserting dominance. Crack raised his spear weakly, attempting a lunge, but his strength faltered and I sidestepped, guiding him off balance with a slight twist of the shaft. The spear grazed his shoulder, leaving a deep gash that seared with blood, and he stumbled, finally collapsing onto one knee before the fire. His eyes met mine, no words spoken, only the silent acknowledgement of my supremacy. I lower my weapon slowly, breathing hard, muscles trembling, and the tribe erupted. Shouts of awe and loyalty filled the air, voices calling my name, lifting me in unspoken recognition. Crack remained kneeling, chest rising and falling, the fight drained from him but pride lingering stubbornly in his gaze. I approach him cautiously, spear tip near, but not threatening. Stand, I commanded in their tongue. His gaze flickered to the spear, then slowly, with great effort, he rose. The act alone was a concession. He could fight no longer, but he could survive, and in that survival his loyalty, reluctant though it might be, was mine to cultivate. I let him straighten, then gestured to the tribe. Leadership is not taken by strength alone. It is held by the hand that guides and protects. The words, simple in my tongue but heavy with meaning, resonated. The tribe circled closer, some touching my shoulders, others nodding quietly, while Crack lowered his head, silent. That night, under the blood-red moon, I did not merely win a duel. I claimed the mantle of leadership, the loyalty of the tribe, and the beginning of a new era. My reinforced spear, battered but unbroken, lay beside me, a symbol of strategy, perseverance, and the careful calculus that had turned raw fury into submission. For the first time, I felt the weight of command settle on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as fire, ready to forge a kingdom from the stone and blood of the Stone Age. The morning after the duel, the village stirred with a new rhythm, as though the earth itself had shifted beneath our feet. Crack sat silently by the fire, nursing wounds and pride alike, while the rest of the tribe moved with a sense of renewed purpose. I wasted no time. Leadership, I had learned, was not just about winning battles. It was about shaping the future while keeping the present alive. I called the tribe together, speaking first to Crack, who watched with a wary eye, then to the younger hunters, farmers, and artisans, explaining our next steps with calm authority. We have survived storms, hunts, and strife, I told them. Now we must build more than shelters, more than tools. We must secure food, fortify our homes, and prepare for the days when enemies come, not only from outside, but from hunger itself. My words were not idle. I assigned teams to repair and expand huts, reinforcing walls with stone foundations where possible and raising platforms to keep children and grain safe from rain. Others worked under my guidance to dig channels for irrigation, redirecting the small stream to water crops more efficiently. I demonstrated how to construct simple lever systems to lift heavy stones, showing how small effort multiplied could accomplish what men alone could not. Crack, surprisingly, fell in line, his skill with the spear redirected toward moving logs and guarding work crews. The younger men, inspired, followed me with fervor, carrying baskets of stones and planting seedlings under my watch. The system pulsed quietly at the edge of my awareness. Leadership consolidation, +7. Resource management initiated. Labor efficiency, +15%. I smiled grimly. Every task, every direction given, was a step toward a structured, resilient tribe. I even began sketching crude maps of the surrounding forests and hills, marking areas where game was plentiful, where edible plants could be found, and where veins might lie. The tribe began to understand that under my guidance, each action had purpose, each day a thread in a greater tapestry. Meals became shared labor and planning. Hunts doubled as training for strategy, and even mundane chores like fetching water or grinding grain were infused with discipline and foresight. I moved among them constantly, encouraging, correcting, demonstrating, not as a tyrant, but as a craftsman of order, shaping not only stone and iron, but people and purpose. By evening, the village already looked different. Huts sturdier, storage dug deeper, pathways widened for hauling loads. Crack watched, silent but learning. I knew the consolidation was more than physical. It was psychological. Men who had once whispered, "Liwan is only a strange young man," now looked to me, hesitated before speaking, and measured their actions. The foundation for a thriving, organized tribe was laid not in conquest, but in labor, trust, and subtle authority. And in the quiet moments as I inspected each work site and counted supplies, I felt it. The pulse of a future I would forge not with stone alone, but with iron, strategy, and a mind born from a world far beyond this stone age. By the next week, the village had settled into a rhythm of work and purpose, and I turned my mind toward the most critical project yet, forging iron on a scale the tribe had never seen. The first crude smelt had been a success, but survival required more than one lucky trial. It required a steady supply of metal to fashion tools, weapons, and infrastructure. I called the hunters, the foragers, and a handful of men who had shown aptitude with fire and stone to gather around me. "We will build an ironworks," I declared, voice carrying across the cleared space at the village's edge. Not a pit here, not a one-off fire there. A proper forge, with bellows, a crucible, and a stockpile of ore. Every man who learns will become indispensable. Every strike will make us stronger. I drew sketches in the dirt, crude lines that showed a layout for the smelting area, placement of fuel, channels for airflow, and safety pits to keep fire contained. The tribe leaned in, some confused, some skeptical, but their eyes glimmered with awe. Crack watched silently, now a tempered ally, his pride bridled by the recognition that this project was beyond his brute strength. I assigned tasks according to talent. Men strong with arms would gather stones to form walls, others nimble and patient would construct the bellows, and a few, guided carefully, would monitor the heat and airflow once the fire was lit. I explained, or collection, veins visible on the hills, shallow enough for hand extraction, but needing careful mapping to prevent collapse or waste. I demonstrated techniques I remembered from engineering studies long before my soul had crossed worlds. How to strike or to separate it from rock, how to layer fuel to reach higher temperatures, how to use air to increase combustion efficiency. Some of the older hunters doubted, murmuring that fire alone could never tame the stubborn metal, but I ignored their skepticism. Knowledge, not age, would shape this new power. By midday, teams had been sent to scout for ore veins in nearby hills, marking each location with carved stones for retrieval. Others worked on preparing clay molds and digging pits for crucibles. I moved between groups constantly, correcting mistakes, teaching hands to read the glow of fire, to judge heat by the color of metal, to measure depth and pressure with nothing but sight and touch. Crack, surprisingly, became my enforcer and instructor, guiding men to follow directions with precision. I watched him closely. Though loyalty was still tentative, the duel's memory kept him disciplined. By evening, the first frame of the forge was up, stone walls encasing a pit of layered clay, bellows constructed from tanned hide ready for operation, and men eagerly awaiting their first smelt. I stepped back, surveying the site. The system pulsed quietly. Ironworks project initiated. Labor efficiency plus 10%, or processing potential plus 20%. This was more than survival. It was a foundation. With iron, the tribe would not merely endure. They would rise, tools multiplying strength, weapons enforcing authority, and structures standing taller than timber alone could support. And in that moment, as firelight danced across eager faces, I felt the thrill of creation, of progress, and the certainty that my mind from another world would forge a kingdom from the Stone Age itself. The morning arrived with a pale mist curling over the hills, and the tribe assembled around the new forge with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The clay pit, bellows, and stone walls stood ready, but the true test lay ahead, sustaining heat long enough to smelt or into usable iron. I assigned teams with precision, directing one group to stoke the fire, another to monitor the bellows, and a third to handle the ore carefully, ensuring that each chunk was broken to uniform size. The system hummed faintly. Smelting attempt initiated. Tribe coordination test active. I knelt by the crucible, checking the airflow channels, adjusting the angle of the bellows with meticulous care. Every detail mattered. Too little air, and the fire would fizzle. Too much, and the clay could crack, sending hot embers across the work area. Crack stood nearby, spears set aside, observing the process with an intensity that bordered on fear. Fear not of me, but of failure. He knew the tribe's trust and my authority were riding on this one attempt. The younger men carried fuel in constant rotation, tossing it into the pit with a rhythm I dictated, hands blistered but determined. Sweat poured down my face as I crouched over the glowing embers, gauging temperature by sight, smell, and feel, a combination of instinct, engineering knowledge, and lessons learned from my old world. Minutes stretched like hours, each one a test of patience and coordination. The ore began to glow, dull red at first, then gradually shifting to a deeper, molten hue. My heart pounded. One misstep, misjudged air, uneven fuel, a stumble from a helper, could ruin everything, undo weeks of labor and trust. Crack's eyes flicked between me and the glowing metal, tension rippling through his muscles. Watch the bellows. Keep steady. Do not let it falter. I barked, voice carrying over the pit. The tribe obeyed, movements synchronized, the fire responding as though it understood their rhythm. After what felt like an eternity, the first pour began. Molten iron flowed into the prepared mold, a silvery, glimmering stream that sparked awe across the circle. Cheers erupted, voices trembling between disbelief and elation. Even Hrack's jaw slackened. His pride yielded for the first time entirely to the spectacle of creation. I wiped soot from my brow, surveying the glowing metal as it cooled, solidifying into the first truly forged bar of iron in our fledgling civilization. The system flashed. First controlled smelt success. Iron quality standard. Tribe morale plus 15%. Authority plus 10. Relief surged through me, but there was no time to celebrate fully. I had learned long ago that mastery came not from one success, but from consistency, discipline, and relentless improvement. The tribe now knew the taste of iron, but they had yet to understand its potential, tools, weapons, structures, and the ability to shape the world itself. Hrack, finally lowering his head in acknowledgement, approached me silently. The duel was long past, but tonight, the first forge, the first controlled smelt, had demonstrated clearly who the future belonged to. I allowed a faint smile, knowing this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, we would smelt more, mine deeper, and begin shaping the tools that would elevate the tribe from mere survival to dominance in this untamed Stone Age world. The day after the first successful smelt, I led a small party into the hills to secure more ore, knowing that one batch would not sustain the forge for long. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep cliffs, loose stones, and hidden ravines tested every step. My legs ached, muscles screaming in protest. Yet I moved with calculated precision, marking safe paths, identifying rich veins, and directing the laborers to avoid danger. Crack followed at my side, silent but vigilant, his presence both a reminder of the duel and a symbol of loyalty forced into place by respect. We discovered a vein partially exposed near a ravine, the metal glinting faintly in the morning sun. The rock was brittle, requiring careful extraction to avoid collapse. I instructed the men to work in shifts, balancing speed with caution. Each strike of stone against ore was measured, deliberate, and designed to prevent injury while maximizing yield. Even a small accident could demoralize the tribe, and I could not afford setbacks. The system hummed in my mind, or collection efficiency plus 12%. Environmental hazard detection active. Midway through the dig, a sudden tremor shook the cliffside. Loose rocks clattered down, narrowly missing a laborer. I reacted instinctively, shouting warnings and throwing my spear to wedge a precarious boulder temporarily in place. Crack leapt to my side, steadying another worker who had frozen in fear. The tribe watched in awe, seeing their leader not only directing labor, but also protecting them from harm. By late afternoon, we had extracted several heavy chunks of ore and began transporting them back to the forge. The path was treacherous, yet careful planning and teamwork ensured no injuries. On the way down, I paused, surveying the valley below. Smoke from our forge mingled with the mist, visible even from this height, a testament to the tribe's growing capability. The men began to murmur, quietly admiring the organization and foresight that guided every action. Crack, breathing hard from exertion, finally spoke, his voice low but respectful. "You think like the mountain itself, not like a man." I offered no reply, letting the weight of achievement speak. That evening, as the ore was loaded into the forge and fires stoked once more, I gathered the tribe. We shared a simple meal of roasted game and grains. Yet even this mundane act now carried symbolism. Hard work rewarded, safety maintained, and progress undeniable. Trust had been forged in fire alongside iron. Loyalty was no longer fragile, but tempered. The system pulsed quietly. Tribe loyalty plus 15%. Resource security plus 20%. Leadership authority plus 12%. I allowed a faint smile, knowing the challenges ahead would be greater. Yet this day proved the principle. When vision, strategy, and protection aligned, the tribe would follow. Obstacles became opportunities, and the future, once uncertain and wild, could now be shaped by my mind and hand. The following morning, the first batch of smelted iron cooled in the crucibles, its dark, glossy sheen catching the sunlight and reflecting the excitement of the tribe. I gathered the artisans and strongest men, explaining that the metal would now become more than a symbol. It would be the backbone of our survival and expansion. Hammers rang against anvils for the first time, sparks flying as crude but functional tools took shape. Chisels for shaping wood, picks for mining, and knives sharp enough to cut meat or defend against predators. I demonstrated the proper striking technique, ensuring that energy was maximized without shattering the iron or exhausting the smiths. Crack oversaw a group tasked with forging rudimentary spears and axes for the hunters. His experience guiding their motions as my designs ensured they were balanced, sharp, and durable. The tribe watched in awe as the raw, stubborn, or was transformed into instruments of work and power. Children peeked from behind walls. Women carried water for cooling, and men whispered in hushed tones about the stranger who wielded knowledge like magic. I tested each tool personally, striking, chopping, and adjusting until each exceeded the quality of its previous wooden or stone counterparts. The system hummed faintly. Tool quality plus 15%. Weapon readiness plus 10%. Tribe productivity plus 12%. Beyond daily utility, the weapons carried a psychological weight. Iron spears and axes gave the tribe confidence that no bandit, wild beast, or rival tribe could easily challenge us. I organized drills, having the hunters practice formation attacks with spears, learning to coordinate thrusts, cover each other, and defend against ambushes. Crack's own hands moved expertly, showing that raw strength, when combined with method and guidance, could be devastating. Even the women contributed, assisting with sharpening, reinforcing handles, and preparing supply runs. Each act reinforced the sense that survival was now collective, and my role as the leader was not just to dictate, but to teach, protect, and innovate. By midday, simple but sturdy carts were constructed to transport iron for future projects. Wooden frames reinforced with iron strips, allowing us to move heavier stones and ore. The forge glowed continuously, bellows pumping with rhythm, a heartbeat of progress across the village. I stepped back, surveying the activity, sweat running down my face, muscles screaming, yet a deep satisfaction warming my chest. The tribe had not only learned to produce iron, they had learned to trust in the vision I carried from another world, to see that careful planning, engineering knowledge, and disciplined labor could reshape their existence. And in that moment, as I held a newly forged spear and watch rack in the hunters' practice coordinated strikes, I realized the Stone Age had become our forge, and we were beginning to mold it into a kingdom of tools, weapons, and power. One iron bar, one swing, and one loyal follower at a time. By the time the next moon rose over the valley, the forge had become the center of the tribe's life, a constant blaze that symbolized warmth, strength, and transformation. But with progress came attention. Smoke rising day and night could be seen for miles, and I knew sooner or later others would come, some curious, some hungry, some armed. The first step to survival was no longer just food and tools, it was defense. Standing atop the hill overlooking the village, I studied the landscape. The gentle bend of the river to the east, dense forest to the west, and jagged ridges forming a natural wall to the north. Only the southern plains lay open, an easy path for travelers or raiders. "We will build there," I said aloud, marking the earth with my spear. Crack and several hunters gathered beside me, following the motion of my hand as I outlined a rough, semicircular wall that would connect to the ridges, forming a natural stronghold. Stone base, wooden palisade above. 2 watchtowers here and here. Trenches dug in front. They exchanged uncertain glances and used to such planning. To them, defense was a matter of brute reaction, not construction. I explained in detail, sketching diagrams with a stick on the soil, showing how a wall could double in strength, how trenches could slow mounted attackers, and how elevation gave advantage. My engineering instinct from Earth came alive, the thrill of design, structure, and control pulsing through my veins. The next days became a storm of labor. The men hauled logs, women wove ropes, and children carried stones. Each task was divided, tracked, and adjusted according to efficiency. I built simple pulleys from vines and wood, enabling heavier loads to be lifted and placed. Every improvement was small, yet revolutionary to them. The system whispered, fortification progress, 23%. Labor efficiency, plus 11%. Tribe morale stable. By dusk, the foundation for the first wall rose. A crude, uneven line of stone and timber, but it was ours. I walked along its edge, touching the rough surfaces, imagining the walls completed, gates sealed, smoke rising safely from within. The tribe began to whisper a new name for the place, Iron Hollow. It wasn't just a village anymore. It was a growing fortress, a nucleus of civilization born in the Stone Age. That night, under flickering torchlight, I shared roasted meat and water with the laborers, watching their tired faces glow with pride. "You've built something that will stand long after we're gone," I said quietly. Crack nodded in agreement, his deep voice rumbling like stone shifting. This is more than safety. It's power." I looked out over the half-finished wall and felt the truth of his words. Power built on unity, knowledge, and fire, and now it was time to expand that reach beyond our borders. At dawn, I set out with a group of 6 men, including Hrak and 2 younger scouts, to explore beyond the known hills. The air was crisp and sharp with dew, and a pale mist rolled across the plains like a sleeping beast. I carried with me a crude map, just stretched bark smoothed by hand, charcoal markings outlining our valley and river. My purpose was simple yet vital, to understand what surrounded us, what threatened us, and what could sustain us. As an engineer back on Earth, maps had been abstract tools. Here, they meant survival. Each bend of the river, each ridge or clearing could mean life or death for the tribe. We moved quietly through the underbrush, marking distances by the sun's height and pacing intervals. I used knots on a cord to estimate measures, roughly translating them into the map. The men watched curiously, whispering as I measured and sketched, their respect deepening as they realized this strange method allowed me to predict paths and distances far better than guesswork. By midday, we found traces of another tribe, broken arrowheads, footprints near a dried creek, and faint smoke curling beyond the distant ridge. "They've been hunting close," Crack muttered, crouching beside a track. "Too close." I nodded, noting the location on the map. It wasn't yet confrontation time, but the awareness was crucial. Knowledge of others meant power, and I intended to use it long before swords, or spears, were drawn. We moved farther east, following the riverbank until we discovered a marsh rich with reeds, fish, and clay. I immediately marked it, a future site for expansion or resource gathering. The clay could be used for improved forges and storage vessels, the reeds for construction and insulation. By late afternoon, we climbed a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, the world opened wide before us, forest to the west, plains stretching endlessly to the south, and the faint shimmer of mountains beyond. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from possibility. "This," I whispered, gesturing across the landscape, "is what we'll shape." Crack stared silently, and I could see realization dawning behind his eyes, that I wasn't just protecting a tribe, I was building something larger. On the way back, we passed through a grove filled with strange metallic stones. I tested one, scraping it against my knife, and saw a faint gleam of potential iron or mixed with copper traces. My pulse quickened. "Mark this site," I ordered. The men obeyed instantly. The system flickered faintly. Resource node discovered. New or type. Mixed iron-copper vein. Potential upgrade path. Alloy development. The message sent a surge of adrenaline through me. I could already see the next phase, stronger tools, better weapons, maybe even primitive steel if the right methods were applied. By the time we returned to Iron Hollow, the sun had dipped low, painting the horizon blood red. I spread the bark map across a flat stone, the tribe gathering around as I explained the findings, food sources, rival tracks, or deposits. My words carried weight now, shaping their imagination of the world beyond our fires. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Knowledge itself was our first empire. By the next morning, the entire tribe stirred with renewed energy. The discoveries from our expedition were no longer just markings on bark. They were blueprints for survival and expansion. I stood before the gathered workers, the smoke of the forges rising behind me, and laid out the plan. "We fortify the valley's entrance first," I said, tracing the rough map in the dirt. "Then we channel the river into smaller streams, irrigation for fields and cooling for the forges. Finally, we'll raise an outpost by your site." The people listened with fierce attention. They had seen enough of what my ideas could do: iron tools, better shelters, organized work lines. Now they were ready to believe in more. The first phase began with defenses. I ordered a double ring of sharpened stakes and log walls at the main approach, forming a crude palisade reinforced with mud and clay. We dug shallow trenches before it, designed to slow charging beasts or enemies. It wasn't elegant, but it was functional, defense born of engineering logic, not tribal instinct. Every evening, I inspected the walls myself, adjusting angles, measuring supports, and correcting where gaps weakened the structure. Crack oversaw the laborers, barking orders with renewed vigor. Once, he would have challenged me openly. Now, he worked as my arm, the tribe's strength guided by my design. The next challenge was water. The river's flow had been steady through the rains, but unpredictable in droughts. Using stone picks and iron chisels, we began carving shallow channels branching from the main current. I recalled basic hydrology, slope gradients, water pressure, sediment flow. The tribe watched as I used a simple wooden frame with a weighted string to measure the incline. Water follows the line of patience, I told them. Give it a path, and it will serve you forever. It took days of sweat and calloused hands, but when the first channel carried a trickle of clear water into our fields, cheers broke out. The women rushed to wet the earth, planting early grains and roots. Children laughed, splashing in the new stream. Even the elders looked on in disbelief. They called it the river's gift, but I knew it was human will made visible. The final task, the mining outpost, demanded both courage and coordination. The Ur site lay 3 days' travel east, near the foothills, where beasts and rival tribes might roam. I selected 20 men and women, miners, hunters, and guards. We packed food, tools, and the first crude iron picks. You won't just dig, I told them. You'll build the next heart of our tribe. We erected simple shelters of stone and thatch, and I designed a pit system for ore extraction, angled slopes to prevent collapse, drainage channels for rain. It was primitive compared to the mines I knew in my old world, but for this era, it was revolutionary. Within a week, they returned with heavy baskets of raw ore, their faces blackened but triumphant. We smelted it that night, and as molten metal poured into the molds, sparks danced like tiny stars around the forge. Watching it, I felt a deep, visceral satisfaction. Every wall, every channel, every pickaxe was a step away from chaos, a step toward civilization. But as I gazed toward the dark horizon, I also knew this progress would draw eyes. Fire, iron, and order. These were powers ancient lands never ignored for long. The first signs of unrest came quietly, like ripples before a storm. It began with a stray scout found at the forest's edge, a youth no older than 16, trembling and half-starved. He spoke a dialect none of my people fully understood, but the markings on his hide cloak told a clearer story. He came from the western plains, from a tribe that hunted mammoths and worshipped bone totems. When questioned gently, the boy revealed that his people had seen our fires, many fires, burning brighter than any nomad camp. The Skyflame clan calls you the Iron Spirits, he said through a trembling interpreter. They say you steal the earth's blood and cage it with your tools. The word spread through Iron Hollow like whispers of fate. At night, I could feel the tribe's unease, the crackling of torches, the murmured debates near the palisade walls. They had tasted progress, but fear lingered in their bones. They knew that envy could bring spears as surely as hunger. I summoned my closest allies, Hrak, Mira, Old Jean, and the young scout Lura. We met in the forge house, its light painting the stone walls in a molten glow. If others are watching, I began, they'll come. Not yet perhaps, but soon. We must be ready for both talk and blood. Hrak's hand clenched on the table. Let them come. Iron answers all. Mira shot him a glare. Iron also draws more iron, fool. We can't fight everyone. Her words hung in the smoke. She was right. Even with our growing strength, we weren't yet ready for open war. I leaned over the table, sketching crude marks with a coal stick. We'll fortify in silence. Double the outer stakes. Lay hidden ditches near the river pass. And start gathering stores, grain, dried meat, water. If we need to vanish or hold out, we'll be ready. Old Jean, ever cautious, nodded. And what of the boy? I studied him. The scared envoy fate had dropped at our gates. He goes home, I said, but not empty-handed. I gave him a small iron knife, polished smooth, wrapped in woven grass. Tell your chief the Iron Hollow does not steal blood. We forge it to live. If they wish to talk, send envoys. If they wish to fight, remember this. Iron cuts deeper than bone. The next days were a quiet frenzy of work. I ordered concealed observation posts along the ridges, small wooden towers masked by leaves. Scouts rotated every night, their watchfires dim and shielded. We also began reinforcing the main forge house into a fortress core. Layered stone walls, heavy doors, and a tunnel leading down to the water channel. A secret escape route should the valley fall. At the same time, I had Mira train selected youth in simple coded signals, drum beats, and smoke patterns to alert the tribe in case of distant movement. It wasn't paranoia, it was design. Civilization required more than creation. It required survival. By the end of that moon cycle, the boys' tribe had not yet come, but new rumors drifted through traders passing the plains. They spoke of a valley of fire that burned metal into weapons, a place of spirits and danger. Each retelling made the legend larger, stranger, and all the more dangerous. Standing on the wall one night, I watched the lights of our village flicker against the dark horizon. They'll come, I murmured to myself. But when they do, they'll find not spirits, but a kingdom being born. They arrived at dawn, just as the mist still curled along the valley floor. A dozen figures approached from the western ridge, men and women draped in animal pelts, their faces painted with ochre and ash. They bore no banners, only long spears tipped with polished bone and shells that rattled faintly with each step. From atop of the palisade, my guards tensed, gripping their crude, iron-tipped weapons. Crack's hand hovered near his axe, his eyes narrowed. Strangers, he muttered, maybe scouts for war. But I saw something different in their approach. Their formation was cautious, not aggressive. The one in front, a tall woman with braided black hair and a necklace of tusk fragments, raised an open hand. I nodded to my people. No arrows, I ordered quietly. Let them through. When the gate creaked open, the strangers entered with measured steps, gazes sweeping over the valley. The fortified walls, the irrigation channels, the faint smoke of forges still burning even in daylight. I could see a mixing with fear in their eyes. This place must have looked like sorcery to them. I stepped forward, unarmed, wearing a tunic stained with soot and the faint gleam of an iron dagger at my waist. You stand in Iron Hollow, I said, projecting calm authority. Who comes before us? The tall woman bowed slightly, an unexpected gesture of respect. I am Sira of the Dawn Wolf clan, she replied, her accent rough but understandable. We come to see the one who forges blood into stone. Behind her, her warriors murmured the strange title, half reverence, half superstition. I gestured to the forge house courtyard. Then you have found him. Sit. You've traveled far. As they settled around the fire pit, my people watched in silence, tense and alert. Mira brewed a bitter drink from roasted roots and offered it. The visitors sniffed it warily before drinking. Their leader's eyes flicked between me and the iron tools laid neatly by the forge. Picks, chisels, spearheads. Your fire eats the earth, Cirrus said slowly, and gives it new shape. Our elders call it dangerous, but our warriors call it power. I met her gaze evenly. Power depends on the hand that wields it. A knife can feed or kill. Iron is the same. Her lips curved faintly. You speak like a shaman. No, I said with a small smile. I speak like a man who remembers what came before. The words made no sense to her, but they carried weight nonetheless. For hours we talked, of weather, of trade, of the beasts that roamed the plains. She asked questions about our tools, our walls, and our strange channels that brought water without buckets. I answered enough to spark curiosity, never enough to reveal method. When she finally rose, she offered me a carved bone amulet, a symbol of kinship between clans. The Dawn Wolf does not wish war, she said, but others may come. The sky flame burns for blood. I accepted the token, bowing slightly. Tell your people this, I replied. The Iron Hollow welcomes trade and peace. But if the sky flame comes to burn, they'll find their fire quenched in steel. As the delegation departed, I watched them fade into the mist, their shapes swallowed by the hills. Around me, the tribe began to murmur, some relieved, others anxious. Mira stepped closer. You've made a friend, she said softly, and an enemy who'll hear of it soon. I nodded, my mind already moving beyond. Diplomacy had opened a door, but it had also drawn a line. The age of isolation was ending. The Stone Age was waking to the sound of iron. When Sira's delegation vanished beyond the ridge, the valley seemed to exhale. For the first time in many moons, there was quiet. No hammering, no shouts, only the faint hiss of the forge cooling for the night. But that quiet did not last. By dusk, the council hall filled with murmurs. Crack sat with his arms crossed, face shadowed by torchlight. Mira stood opposite him, calm but firm. Old Jean occupied his usual place near the entrance, silent, observing everyone. You should not have let them leave alive, Crack growled at last, breaking the tension. They saw too much. Our walls, our forges, our weapons. They'll carry tales, and the sky flame will not wait for talk. They'll come with war. Myra's eyes flashed. And if we killed them, the Dawn Wolf would come first. Do you want two enemies instead of one? The two locked gazes like drawn blades. The younger members shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty and fear. I raised a hand, silencing them. Enough, I said. Both of you are right. Syrah's people will spread word. There's no stopping that now. But whether those words become a spark or a bridge depends on what we do next. I took a breath, feeling the weight of 100 watching eyes. The sky flame will hear of us, yes. But I'd rather they hear of builders than butchers. Our iron gives us an advantage, but arrogance could still bury us. Crack spat on the ground. You talk like they'll listen to reason. They won't. These are men who burn their own dead to feed their gods. Then we make sure their gods fear us. Mira cut in sharply. Let them see what fire becomes when tempered by knowledge. I let the silence stretch, measuring every word before I spoke. We'll do both. I'll send runners to the Dawn Wolf. Tell them we accept alliance in principle, in trade and mutual defense. If they agree, they'll stand as a buffer between us and the sky flame. Meanwhile, we strengthen Iron Hollow. New walls, better weapons, hidden caches in the forest, in case we need to retreat or strike from shadows. Old Jean finally stirred, his voice a rough whisper. You build fast, Li-Wan, but faster still will come envy. Can you forge men's hearts as easily as their tools? I didn't answer immediately. The truth was I wasn't sure. Forging steel obeyed predictable laws, heat, pressure, and cooling. People did not. Then I'll learn, I said quietly, because if I fail that, all the iron in the world won't save us. The meeting dragged late into the night. Plans were drawn, scouts assigned, and the forge ordered to work double shifts. Yet beneath the motion, unease coiled like a living thing. Outside, wind howled through the valley, carrying faint echoes from the plains, drum beats, distant and irregular. Mira caught my glance. They're closer than you think, she murmured. I looked toward the dark horizon, where a faint red glimmer pulsed far away, like fire licking the edge of the sky. Then we have little time, I said. The sky flame is moving. Let's see if iron burns hotter than fire. The next morning, Iron Hollow roared to life like a waking giant. The clang of metal echoed through the valley, a sound that no longer spoke of mere survival, but of preparation. The tribe moved with precision now, each man and woman assigned, each tool accounted for. Under my direction, the ironworks expanded beyond the first crude forge. We built twin furnaces on opposite ends of the valley, fed by charcoal, and or hauled in carts drawn by thick-haired oxen domesticated from the wild herds nearby. Sparks painted the dawn as we raised new walls. Thick timber reinforced with metal spikes, the first hint of a fortress in a world still half wild. Crack oversaw the defense lines with a warrior's zeal, while Mira trained the archers in flanking tactics I had adapted from Earth's old strategies. For the first time, formation replaced chaos. I watched from the rampart, heart thrumming at the sight. This was no longer a village of hunters. It was becoming a citadel of order, born from the fire of necessity. Meanwhile, I sent 3 envoys, men I trusted with my life, toward the Dawn Wolf's lands, bearing iron tools, bronze ornaments, and a message of alliance sealed with a mark of Iron Hollow. They would need 7 days to cross the forest and reach the wolf capital, and if they failed, 7 days was all we'd have before the sky flame reached us. By the 3rd day, the valley smelled of coal and oil. Children carried baskets of slag to the river. Women wove hides into shields. Men sharpened spears on whetstones that hissed with rhythm. Yet beneath the industry, fear still lingered. At night, I could hear murmurs in the huts, questions whispered between lovers and parents. Would the fire tribe come? Would the iron hold? I worked to drown those doubts with action. I introduced night watchtowers, crude warning bells, and smoke signals that could alert the valley if an attack came from any direction. From the old maps I had scratched in the dirt weeks ago, we started cutting small outposts along the ridge lines. Early eyes for a young civilization that could not afford blindness. Still, I couldn't shake the unease building in my chest. The world outside our valley was shifting faster than I had imagined. The Dawn Wolf emissaries had not yet returned, and already our scouts brought back troubling signs. Tracks in the grasslands, black banners sighted from afar, and the strange metallic scent of burnt earth. The Sky Flame were on the move, testing their reach, burning small settlements along the border. I had seen this pattern before in the wars of history. Reconnaissance by destruction, the prelude to conquest. That night, as the moon hung pale over Iron Hollow, I stood by the forge alone, watching the molten iron swirl like blood under light. "How long before they come?" Mira asked softly from behind me. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair tied back, her eyes weary but steady. "Soon," I said, "and when they do, they'll find more than they expected." She smiled faintly. "You sound almost like a god." I shook my head. "No gods, just a man who remembers another world." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest whiff of smoke from far beyond our borders. I looked east, toward the unseen fires crawling closer each day. My hand clenched around the iron railing until it burned my skin. "Let them come," I whispered. "The age of fire ends here. The age of iron begins." The Dawn Wolf capital was nothing like Iron Hollow, where our valley roared with the raw rhythm of hammers and smoke. Their city breathed refinement carved from wilderness. The envoys, 3 men hardened by weeks of travel through the forest, approached a settlement of towering totems, carved stone walls, and banners dyed in deep red and black. Wolves, fanged and regal, adorned every gate. Fires burned in controlled braziers, not for warmth, but as a symbol of vigilance. The Dawn Wolf people were disciplined, muscular, and strikingly uniform in dress. Leather vests lined with bone, bronze ornaments marking rank. At the center rose a citadel built atop a cliff, its stairs guarded by warriors in gray hides and scar-marked faces. The leader of the envoys, Terran, remembered Li Wan's instructions clearly. Offer them the gift of iron, but never humility. When they reached the outer court, a dozen spears crossed before them. The gatekeeper, a woman with half her face tattooed like a wolf snarl, barked a question in their tongue. "Who seeks entry to the Dawn Fong?" Terran stepped forward, lifting the black cloth that bore the sigil of Iron Hollow, a hammer and flame crossing over a mountain. "We come bearing gifts and words from Li Wan, chieftain of Iron Hollow," he said, voice strong despite his exhaustion. The guards exchanged wary glances. One of them disappeared inside. Minutes later, the envoy was led through winding stone corridors to a hall vast as a cathedral. At the far end sat the Wolf King. He was younger than expected, perhaps no older than Li Wan himself, though his presence filled the room. His hair was bound by bone rings, his shoulders draped in white fur. 2 wolves lounged beside his throne, silent as shadows. "Iron Hollow," he repeated, tasting the words. "A new tribe that rises from stone and ash." His gaze swept over the gifts, gleaming iron blades, chisels, and a polished spearhead unlike anything his bronzesmiths could craft. "These are not of the earth, I know," he murmured. "How do you shape metal harder than God's teeth?" Terran bowed slightly, as Li Wan had taught, "Through fire and patience. Our leader says iron is not a gift from gods, but a craft of men. He offers trade and alliance, to stand together against the sky flame that burns the borders." The Wolf King's expression darkened. The sky flame. He rose, descending the dais with a slow, measured step. "They raided my southern camp 2 nights past, burned the grain stores, took 50 slaves." His fist clenched. "They claim to serve the Sun Mother, but they serve only conquest." He stopped before the iron spearhead and lifted it. "If your leader truly commands such craft, then he is dangerous, either as ally or rival." The hall buzzed with whispers. The king turned to his advisors, who murmured in their tongue. After a long silence, he faced the envoys again. "Tell your Iron Lord this," he said. If he stands ready to share his fire and his strength, we will send hunters and warriors to his valley. If he hoards it, we will come for it ourselves. Terran bowed low, understanding the weight of both threat and offer. Then we shall await your hunters and friendship. The Wolf King's lips curved slightly. We shall see how true that word rings when iron meets blood. When the envoys left the capital that night, the torches along the walls flickered crimson against the wind. The youngest of them, Ruaw, whispered, "Do you think the king will truly send aid?" Terran's eyes stayed fixed on the distant north. Aid or not, they'll come. And when they do, they'll judge whether Li Wan's dream is the birth of a kingdom or the spark of a war. The envoys returned on the 12th dawn, weary but alive. From the watchtower, the sentry's shouts echoed through the valley before sunrise. Our men return. The dawn wolves come. Within minutes, the entire tribe had gathered by the outer gate. I arrived still half-dressed from the forge, soot on my arms, heart hammering. Terran dismounted first, face gaunt and sunburned but eyes bright. Behind him, a small procession followed. Not an army, but a delegation. 10 dawn wolf warriors bearing packs and banners, each armed with curved bronze blades and wrapped in wolfskins. The people of Iron Hollow whispered, torn between awe and fear. These strangers carried themselves with the confidence of seasoned hunters, but their gaze lingered curiously on our walls, our furnaces, the trails of smoke that rose like living veins through the valley. Terran knelt before me, presenting a small chest sealed in wax and rope. "Message from the Wolf King," he said. I broke the seal and unfolded the hardened bark scroll. The words were blunt, carved in the Dawn tongue, but transcribed by my own runes as Terran translated. "Iron Lord Li Wan, the Wolf King acknowledges your strength. We send 10 to learn and 10 to test. If you prove worthy, we shall stand beside you. If not, we shall take what you build." I stared at it for a long moment, then laughed softly. "So, what begins?" I murmured. "The test." The Dawn Wolf envoys were housed near the lower terraces, close enough to observe the forges, but far from the core of Iron Hollow. I appointed Mira as their translator and guide. Knowing her sharp tongue, could both charm and cut as needed. The first days were uneasy. The wolf warriors watched our every move, testing our food, observing our labors. They admired the iron tools, but also seemed to map every wall and gate with predatory precision. At night, I held council with my closest lieutenants. "This is no alliance yet," I told them. "They're scouts disguised as friends. We must show them power without revealing weakness." Crack grinned, his bruised face catching the forge light. "Then let them see the forge blaze," he said. "Let them watch us shape mountains." And so we did. For 3 days straight, the forge burned without pause. My men smelted or poured molds, hammered edges until the air rang with a sound that even the wolf envoys stopped to watch. When they saw red-hot metal turned into blades harder than anything their bronze could match, their leader, a tall woman named Vera, approached me. "You claim this craft comes from knowledge, not God's," she said. "Then show us your God's gift." I handed her an iron knife. "Hold it to flame," I said. She did, and when the metal refused to melt, her eyes widened slightly. "It endures, because it's not faith that forged it," I said. "It's will." That night, Mira came to me quietly. "Vera speaks with the others after dark," she warned. "They debate whether to send word back that you're too dangerous to trust." I sighed. As expected, they came to judge, not to learn. I looked up at the half-built watchtower against the moonlit sky. Then let them see what danger really means. I ordered the walls reinforced and the gates rebuilt using new riveted hinges, the kind I remembered from Earth's early ironworks. I also had a secret tunnel constructed beneath the eastern slope, wide enough for a dozen men to move unseen. If the dawn wolves turned against us, they would not find us blind. By dawn, the first flake of winter snow drifted down over Iron Hollow. The mountains glowed faintly silver, and the forge fires painted red streaks against the frost. "Snow already?" Mira murmured beside me. I nodded. "It means the year turns. And with it, so does fate." Somewhere beyond those snowy ridges, the sky flame gathered their armies, and now Within our walls, the wolves watched from the shadows. For the first time, I felt the stirrings of a kingdom's birth, fragile, smoldering, and surrounded by teeth. The storm began not with thunder, but with silence. For 3 days after the snow fell, the wind carried no bird song, no echo of distant herds, only the faint hum of the forge and the restless beat of the watch drums. I stood at the highest terrace of Iron Hollow, looking north toward the snow-veiled horizon. The valley that had once seemed so vast now felt like a trap, walls of white enclosing us from every side. Behind me, the dawn wolf envoys moved quietly, their faces unreadable. Even Vera's confident smirk had faded into wary watchfulness. They sensed it too, the weight pressing down from the heavens, the scent of iron and smoke before war. By the 4th morning, scouts returned from both east and west. From the east came the sky flames approach, banners of crimson and gold, over 1,000 strong, moving in disciplined formations across the frozen plains. From the west, smaller but swifter movements, the dawn wolves wore bands, slipping through forests and ravines, their campfires spotted by night like the eyes of wolves closing in. Both sides claimed they sought peace with the Iron Lord, but their paths were converging. Iron Hollow had become the heart of a storm that neither army intended to share. I gathered the council that night beneath the forge's central chamber, where the heat still pulsed like a heartbeat against the stone. Mira laid the maps before us, rough sketches of mountains, rivers, and passes carved with charcoal and ash. "We have perhaps 6 days before the first contact," she said. 7, if the snows deepen. Taryn looked grim. "They'll meet before then. If the wolves and sky flame clash, they'll do it on our doorstep." I traced a line across the map where the eastern ridge curved down to the frozen river. "Then we prepare this ground as our shield," I said. "If they fight, they will bleed on our terms." "2 armies, Liwan," Mira said quietly, "and we stand between them." "Exactly," I replied. "And that means for now, we hold our fire and let their pride do the work." The following days blurred into motion. Every forge, every hand, every hammer found purpose. Iron Hollow became a hive of preparation. Men shaping spearheads, women weaving leather armor, children carrying coals to fuel the furnaces. The dawn wolves watched, at first aloof, but soon curiosity overcame pride. Some joined the laborers, testing our tools, comparing blade to blade. Vera herself walked the new walls at dusk, and when I found her there, she asked without pretense, "Do you mean to fight both sides?" I answered, "I mean to survive both." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we will too." The sky flame arrived first, not their full host, but an advance column under a crimson banner marked with a golden sunburst. Their envoys rode ahead, armored in bronze polished to mirror shine, their voices carrying over the snow. "The Flame King offers protection and unity. Lay down your iron and be received as kin." The men on the walls did not answer. I stood atop the gate, my breath freezing in the air. "Tell your king," I called back, "that Iron Hollow bends to none. We forge our own dawn." The envoy stared, then smiled thinly. "Then your dawn shall burn." They turned and rode back through the drifts, their red cloaks vanishing like embers in fog. When night fell, the horizon burned, not from battle, but from signal fires. To the east, the sky flame's torches flared like rivers of fire. To the west, the wolf's howls rose through the trees. Iron Hollow stood between them, its forges glowing red in the heart of the snow. I watched from the wall until dawn, my hands clenched around the railing, and whispered to the cold wind, "So this is how kingdoms are born, not from peace, but from the promise of war." At dawn, the world broke open. The first sound was not steel, but thunder, the kind that came from the pounding of thousands of feet against frozen earth. The mist still clung to the valley when the sky flame banners emerged from the east, their bronze shields catching the morning light like burning mirrors. From the west came the wolves, lean, furious, wrapped in furs and painted with ash, their war horns echoing off the cliffs. Between them, the white expanse of the plain stretched silent and untouched. For one breathless moment, it seemed both sides hesitated, the calm before the fracture. Then the Sky Flame commander raised his spear, and the sun caught its tip, a signal that turned silence into chaos. I watched from Iron Hollow's southern wall as the two armies collided. It was less a battle than an avalanche. Lines broke before they fully met. Screams, steel, and smoke rolled like a living storm. The ground trembled beneath the weight of it, and even from here, I could smell the iron, sharp and wet. The wolves fought like shadows, darting and striking from the flanks, while the Sky Flame moved as a wall of fire, advancing with brutal discipline. It was art and slaughter woven together, ancient fury meeting the precision of empire. Lordly, Mira said behind me, her voice tight. If they push west, the wolves will be crushed. If they turn north, the flame will encircle us. And if we intervene too soon, I said quietly, we give them a common enemy. Taryn spat over the wall. We can't just watch. We can't, I said, and we must until the right moment. But even as I said it, I could feel the weight of the choice pressing like a stone in my chest. Every minute that passed meant more dead, more blood in the snow, but also more chance for both armies to burn themselves hollow. Iron Hollow's strength was growing, but not yet enough to fight both sides. The forge fires still glowed behind me, our new iron weapons gleaming on the racks, untested in war. I clenched my fists, remembering another life, one of factories, blueprints, and systems. The logic of efficiency whispered in my mind. Let them consume each other, then claim what remains. But another part of me, older, harder, knew that if the battlefield's tide turned toward our walls, reason would burn with it. The clash grew closer. From the watchtowers, smoke and fire framed the horizon. The wolves had managed to push the Sky Flame's vanguard into the riverbed. A clever move, but the ice began to crack beneath the weight. When the surface gave way, dozens fell screaming into the freezing torrent, crushed beneath shields and armor. The sight silenced even the walls. I could see Vera among them, the Dawn Wolf envoy turned commander, her silver hair streaked with blood as she rallied her kin across the bank. For a heartbeat, her gaze lifted toward me, across the expanse of slaughter, and I saw the question in her eyes. Will you stand idle? Prepare the forges, I said finally. Mira turned, startled. You mean, if the wolves break, the flame will come for us next. If the flame falls, the wolves will plunder what's left. Either way, this war ends at our gates. We intervene, but on our terms. Taryn's grin was grim and sharp. Then Iron Hollow joins the war. No, I said. Iron Hollow ends it. The orders spread like sparks through the camp. Ironclad spears, reinforced shields, the first batch of flame-casting jars, crude but deadly, were hauled to the walls. I climbed the central watchtower as the battle below raged unchecked. Then I lifted the iron horn signal, newly forged in blue. The sound was deep and unnatural, echoing through the valley like the voice of something ancient waking from the earth. The warriors below paused, both wolf and flame, their heads snapping toward the mountains. And there they saw us. Iron Hollow, its forges blazing red against the snow, the new banners unfurling in the wind. Not flame, not fong, but iron, black and unbending. For the first time since I arrived in this age, I felt it fully. Not just survival, but dominion. The age of stone and fire was ending. The age of iron had begun. The moment the iron horn's echo faded, the valley itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stalled, as though the mountains waited for what would come next. Then, as planned, the signal fires ignited along the ridgelines, one after another, cascading down in a chain of blinding orange light. The wolves and the flame warriors turned in confusion toward the cliffs, where the night itself began to burn. Our forge-born weapons gleamed like molten stars as my warriors emerged in formation. 50 men clad in layered hide and iron-studded plating, moving in disciplined lines rather than a mob. I had drilled them for weeks, every motion timed, every call precise. They were not the largest force on the battlefield, but they were the most organized. And in a world still ruled by instinct and rage, organization was a weapon deadlier than fire. "Archers ready," I commanded. The word felt foreign on my tongue. Archers, yet the meaning was ancient. Along the ramparts, Myra's division raised the new composite bows I had designed, their strings lined with woven sinew and animal glue for greater tension. Each arrowhead was iron, small, sharp, and efficient. Target the standards I ordered, not the soldiers. Cut the head, the body dies. The first volley sliced through the mist. The sky flame banners, once proud, once untouchable, toppled like withered trees. Panic rippled through their ranks as their formation broke to shield-bearers scrambling for new orders. The wolves saw the falter and howled, charging in with renewed frenzy, their flanks tearing into the exposed gaps. From the walls, we loosed the second volley. Not arrows this time, but clay jars filled with pitch and oil. When they shattered among the warriors, the mixture ignited in a flash of orange fury. Fire rained from above, not divine but man-made, and the screams that followed turned to chaos. Still, I knew chaos was only the first step. I turned to Hrak, who now served as my captain of defense. "Now," I said, "smoke deployment." He nodded once and hurled the first iron sphere into the field, a hollow shell packed with damp powder and resin. When it cracked, thick black smoke poured forth, carried by the wind into the sky flame ranks. Confusion deepened. Visibility vanished. Men shouted orders no one could hear. Beneath that veil, Iron Hollow's vanguard advanced, shields interlocked, spears thrusting low and fast. They struck like an engineered tide. No wasted motion, no hesitation. For the first time in their lives, the warriors of the old world faced strategy crafted by a mind that had known machines and systems. I stood atop the rampart, watching the shape of history change before me. The sky flames lines dissolved into disarray. Their polished armor, once symbols of fear, now glinted uselessly as the wolves drove them toward the river. Yet even the wolves, wild and uncoordinated, found themselves reeling from the smoke and fire, unable to tell friend from foe. In that confusion, Iron Hollow emerged, not ally, not enemy, but something new. "Send the signal," I said. Mira raised the iron horn again, its note deep and resonant. This time, it was not a warning, it was a declaration. Across the battlefield, our warriors unfurled banners painted in dark metallic pigment, the symbol of a circle broken by 3 lines, representing forge, unity, and dominion. The men who saw it paused, even as they bled. For a moment, both tribes stared at the rising banner on the mountain, the symbol of iron, and I knew they felt what I had intended: awe, fear, and inevitability. Psychological warfare was a simple equation. The mind broke before the body. I had no need to destroy both armies, only to make them believe the war was already lost. And as the smoke swallowed the sun and the firelight danced upon the valley floor, I realized it was working. The flame hesitated. The wolves retreated to regroup. The battlefield went still again, not because peace had returned, but because every man who stood there had just glimpsed the future, and it wore iron. I exhaled slowly, the heat of the forge winds licking my face. "They've seen enough," I said to Mira. "Let the survivors carry the story." She turned to me, a faint smile curving her lips. "You've just declared war on an entire age." I looked toward the plains, where the last embers of the battle smoldered like dying stars. "No," I said softly, "I've declared the next one." When the fires finally died, the valley was unrecognizable. The snow had melted into black mud streaked with soot and blood, and the air reeked of iron, smoke, and the raw stench of death. The once white plain now looked like a forge floor, scorched, dented, and littered with the fragments of an old era. I stood at the forefront of my warriors as the last echoes of battle faded into the wind. Around us, the remnants of both armies staggered and fell, their banners reduced to ash. The sky flame's proud insignia lay half-buried in the muck, trampled beneath the boots of men who no longer believed in their own invincibility. I walked slowly among the wreckage. The wolves watched in wary silence as we approached. They no longer raised their blades. Even the most feral among them seemed stunned into stillness. Mira and Hrak moved behind me, silent sentinels at my side. When I reached the fallen sky flame commander, a man with gilded armor split down the chest from one of our iron spears. I knelt and closed his eyes. Strength without reason leads to ruin, I murmured, though none nearby could understand the language of my old world. Still, the weight of my voice carried meaning. Around us, both flame and wolf warriors bowed their heads, as if instinctively acknowledging the gravity of something larger than victory. We gathered what survivors we could, wounded from both sides, and brought them to the riverbank. There, my healers tended to them with salves and herbs, no distinction made between wolf or flame. Compassion, too, was a weapon, and I wielded it as surely as any spear. "They'll remember this mercy," Mira said as she tied a bandage around a flame soldier's arm. I nodded. "And when they tell their chiefs and kings, they'll speak not of battle, but of Iron Hollow." By dusk, emissaries from the wolves came to our gates. Vera herself, her armor blood-stained and dented, rode up the slope and dismounted before me. "You broke the flame," she said, her voice rough from shouting commands through smoke. "You broke us too." Her words carried neither bitterness nor accusation, only awe. I met her gaze steadily. "I broke what needed to be broken," I said. "Now we build what comes next." She studied me in silence, then removed the bone clasp from her shoulder cloak and laid it at my feet, the symbol of truce among the wolf tribes. "Then build it fast," she said, "because word will spread. The Sky Flame Empire won't forget this humiliation. Their main host will come when the snows melt." She was right. Even as we spoke, the first messengers were already running east and west, carrying the legend of the battle. The Iron Lord, they called me, the man whose forges breathed storms. Within days, traders whispered of a new power in the mountains, a tribe that commanded smoke and thunder, that struck down kings with fire that rained from the sky. My people repeated the tales around the hearths at night, eyes bright with pride and fear alike. It was strange hearing my own myth form in real time, a living thing growing beyond my control. That night, from the rampart, I looked down upon the plain. The dead still slept there, thousands of them, beneath a blanket of fresh snow. But amidst that silence, I felt something shift. Power. The kind that drew attention like blood drew predators. Hrak joined me, his arms crossed. "They'll come for us," he said simply. "All of them." "I know," I answered. "That's why we prepare for the next step." He turned to me. "And what's that?" I looked east, toward the unseen lands beyond the mountains, the territories of the old empires still bound by stone, wood, and superstition. "We bring them fire," I said softly, "not to burn them, but to forge them." Behind us, Iron Hollow glowed like a constellation of furnaces, its smoke rising to stain the stars. The age of iron had drawn its first blood, and already the world was listening. The morning after the battle, the air felt heavier than ever. The cries of victory had faded, replaced by the weight of survival. We buried the dead, both friend and foe, in long trenches at the base of the valley. The wolves howled as if mourning with us, their voices rolling across the mountains. By the third day, when the last mound was sealed and the forge fires rekindled, I knew the time for war had passed. It was now the age of structure, of law, of order, of written will. Without it, all that we had won would crumble into dust like the empires before us. I gathered the elders, artisans, and chiefs of allied tribes within the great hall, once a simple storehouse, now transformed with banners, torches, and carved stone seats. The air shimmered with heat from the furnaces below, and the murmur of 50 voices filled the space like wind through iron reeds. When I stood, silence fell. "We have strength," I said, my voice echoing off the walls. "But strength alone cannot build a future. The flames that forged us can also consume us if left unshaped." I paused, letting the words sink in. That is why we must set down the first laws of Iron Hollow, not spoken by chance, not bent by power, but written, lasting beyond any man's lifetime. Mira stood beside me, holding a tablet of smooth clay. On its surface were the first characters I had taught them. Not pictograms or tribal marks, but structured language derived from my memories of Earth. Simple, efficient, precise. The assembly stared as I took a reed stylus and carved the first decree. All men and women of Iron Hollow shall share in labor and defense. None shall own another, but all shall serve the flame that protects us. Gasps rippled through the hall. Slavery and feudal hierarchy had long been the unspoken laws of the wild tribes. Yet here I was unbinding them. Freedom, I said, is the first foundation of strength. Vera, representing the Dawn Wolves, rose next. And when two tribes disagree, who decides truth? I met her gaze. The council, formed of chiefs and craftsmen alike. No voice alone rules, not even mine. Her brow furrowed. And if your counsel turns against you, then I have failed to lead, I said simply. The hall buzzed again, but the words struck deeper than any decree. Slowly, others began to speak. Chieftains, smiths, even healers, contributing laws on trade, kinship, punishment, and reward. By sunset, the clay tablets formed a ring around the hall's central flame, etched with symbols of unity. I had expected resistance, yet what emerged instead was something stronger, a shared hunger to believe in a system greater than tribe or blood. That night, I stood with Mira outside the hall. Snow drifted softly under the red glow of the forges. You've done it, she said. You've made them believe in something new. Not yet, I replied. Belief must become habit, and habit must become history. She smiled faintly. Then you'd best start writing. Over the next weeks, we created the Iron Codex, the first written law in this age. We crafted seals for every clan, symbols for trade, and protocols for governance. Artisans forged iron tablets for permanent record, while I designed a circular council chamber to replace the hall, a place where every seat faced the center, so that no man sat above another. Messengers were dispatched to neighboring valleys, carrying treaties of alliance sealed with iron rings. For the first time, tribes that once raided each other's herds met under banners of negotiation rather than blood. But progress came with murmurs. Some feared that the freedom I offered would erode tradition. Others whispered that a man from nowhere should not shape the laws of the world. I heard every whisper, yet I welcomed them. Doubt was proof of thought, and thought was civilization's first spark. When the last council session ended and the laws were approved, I pressed my hand into a wet clay tablet beside the final decree. Let this mark stand for all who came before and all who will come after, I said. From this day forth, we are not merely survivors of the Stone Age. We are the builders of the Iron Era. With the laws written and the council seated, the next challenge rose before us like a mountain of its own. Not war, but the long, patient labor of civilization. Iron Hollow had survived battle and chaos. Now it had to endure. I knew from my memories of Earth that no kingdom lasted without roads, water, and order. And so began the great works, the first effort to reshape the land itself under human will. The first task was the road, not the muddy, beaten paths that wound between huts, but a true artery of stone and packed clay stretching from the northern gate to the valley floor. I gathered the miners, smiths, and builders, showing them how to cut stone blocks with wedge fractures and use melted tar and gravel for binding. They watched as the first segment took form, smooth and flat, unlike anything they had seen. When travelers from the outer tribes came, they stopped in wonder at the strange, glimmering ribbon that did not sink beneath their feet. The Iron Lord, they whispered, commands even the earth to obey. But it was no magic, only patience and knowledge, sharpened like any blade. Next came the water. Our forges had drained the rivers, and the spring floods threatened to drown the lower huts each thaw. I remembered the aqueducts of old Rome, the irrigation channels of the Yellow River, the logic that water should serve man, not destroy him. I drew plans in the snow, simple ditches leading from the upper stream, stone-lined to resist erosion, branching into basins that fed both the forge and the fields. The work was slow and brutal. Men waded waist-deep in freezing water, hauling stone and clay under constant threat of collapse. Twice, the channel burst and swept away half the scaffolding. But when, after weeks, the first controlled stream flowed smoothly through the heart of Iron Hollow, the people knelt beside it as though beholding a god. "Water that listens," Mira said, smiling as she dipped her hands in the current. I nodded. "Now we can grow not just crops, but time." With irrigation, the barren fields that had once barely sustained a few families now shimmered with life. Barley, millet, and peas sprouted where snow once gathered, and the scent of damp soil replaced that of smoke. I ordered the construction of granaries beside the river, tall, round towers of stone with raised platforms to guard against rot and pests. Inside, we stored surplus grain for the first time. The people murmured in awe, "We will not starve this winter." As the forges expanded, I established divisions of labor: miners in the hills, smelters in the valley, craftsmen in the upper terraces. Each group was overseen by appointed stewards from the council, chosen not for blood but for skill. That decision angered some elders who saw birthright as sacred, but I reminded them, iron does not ask who strikes it, only that the hammer falls true. The phrase spread through the settlement like scripture, recited by apprentices and shouted by builders as they worked. It became the creed of Iron Hollow, a merit born of labor, not lineage. The forges themselves grew in number and sophistication. We built bellows powered by water wheels, replacing the endless toil of human lungs. I adapted designs from memory, simple turbine systems using river current to drive wooden shafts connected by rope and pulleys. When the first wheel turned, clacking and hissing as sparks flew higher from the furnace, the gathered workers gasped. "The river works for us," one shouted. And indeed it did. The sound of the water wheel became the new heartbeat of the city, the rhythm of progress echoing through the valley. At night, I stood on the terrace overlooking the lights of the settlement. Torches flickered along the new road, and the aqueduct's channels glimmered in the moonlight like veins of silver. Where once there had been huts of straw and fear, there now stood walls of stone, towers of iron, and streets that did not sink into mud. Mira joined me, her cloak fluttering in the cold breeze. "It's no longer a village," she said quietly. "It's something more. A beginning," I said, "a foundation for a kingdom that does not yet know its name." She smiled faintly. "Then what will you call it?" I looked at the horizon, where the mountains caught the first faint blush of dawn. "A kingdom of iron," I murmured, "forged not by conquest, but by will." The peace that followed the great works was uneasy, too quiet, like the pause before a storm. I knew that prosperity without defense was an invitation to ruin. The Sky Flame and Dawn Wolf had licked their wounds, but their scouts still prowled the borders. Rumors whispered of new alliances forming, of chieftains who viewed Iron Hollow's order not as inspiration, but as threat. So before they came again, I resolved to ensure they would never find us unready. The time had come to forge not just tools, but soldiers. I began with the iron itself. For months, the forges had produced crude spears, axes, and plowshares, each shaped by individual hands with no uniform design. That chaos could not survive in war. I called the smiths together beneath the roaring furnaces, unrolling diagrams etched with the precision of memory, standardized spearheads with socketed halves, iron-tipped arrows, long blades balanced by calculated weight. The smiths murmured at the uniformity of it. No flourish, no wasted ornament. This, I told them, holding up a finished spear is not art. It is law. Every man who wields one will strike as if he shares the same hand. We began producing in batches, molds set in clay, iron poured, cooled, and sharpened in assembly. For the first time, Iron Hollow's armory took shape. Racks of identical spears glinting like a forest of metal, shields stamped with the mark of the Hollow, a single rising flame within a circle of iron. The sight filled me with something almost sacred, order made visible. Then came the men. I gathered the hunters, miners, and herdsmen, dividing them into tens, hundreds, and thousands. A hierarchy I call the Iron Host. Their leaders were not the strongest, but the most disciplined. I trained them personally in formations drawn from ancient Earth, phalanx lines, rotating front ranks, and flanking maneuvers. When I first commanded them to march in step, their laughter echoed across the field, but by the 10th day, the laughter was gone. The sound of synchronized boots striking frozen earth replaced it, a rhythm of purpose that made even the elders fall silent as they watched. Discipline became the first weapon. Each man was taught to maintain his weapon, to obey orders without hesitation, and to fight not for glory, but for unity. I instituted drills at dawn and dusk, mock battles under simulated siege, and a strict code: theft punished by exile, cowardice by silence, the stripping of voice and name until redemption in battle. Harsh laws, but necessary. Iron must be tempered, or it remains soft. Mira and the council questioned the pace of my reforms. "Do we truly need an army so large?" she asked one night as the forges burned behind her. I met her gaze. "We build so they will not dare to strike. Strength is the only peace they understand." She did not argue further, but I saw unease flicker in her eyes, the fear that we might become what we once fought against. Perhaps she was right, but the world beyond these mountains offered no mercy to dreamers. By the end of the second winter, the Iron Host stood complete, 5,000 men and women clad in leather and bronze, armed with iron that caught the dawn like fire. Their banners bore no dragons or beasts, only the circle and flame, the mark of the forge. I walked before them on the morning of their first parade, the snow crunching under their boots, the wind carrying the clang of steel against shields. "You are not tribesmen," I told them. "You are the wall between what we have built and the world that wishes to break it. You are Iron Hollow." A deep roar rose from their ranks, not wild or frenzied, but measured, a sound that shook the valley like thunder. It was not born of rage, but conviction. In that moment, I realized that Iron Hollow had become more than a refuge. It was a nation in the making, bound not by blood or superstition, but by shared will. As the soldiers dispersed, I climbed to the overlooking ridge where the water wheels turned below and the banners rippled across the frozen fields. Beyond the mountains, smoke rose, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Scouts later confirmed what I already feared. Both the Sky Flame and Dawn Wolf had begun rallying their shattered legions once more. But this time, Iron Hollow would not wait behind its walls. The age of defense had ended. The age of expansion had begun. The decision came not from ambition, but inevitability. Watching the smoke rise beyond the frozen ridges, I knew that waiting meant strangulation by degrees. The rival tribes would never forgive Iron Hollow's strength. They would join hands in hatred long before they'd ever share trade or peace. So the Iron Campaign was born, not as conquest, but as insurance, a preemptive strike to carve space enough for survival. I summoned the War Council beneath the forge hall's roaring pillars. Maps carved on cured hide lay before us, dotted with charcoal marks. Valleys rich in ore, rivers that cut through fertile plains, passes that could choke or shelter armies. "We cannot defend what we have built unless we control what feeds it," I told them. "Every valley we do not claim today will become an enemy fortress tomorrow." The council murmured with unease. Even the hardened veterans of the great works shifted in their seats. War meant risk, death, and the unknown. Mira broke the silence first. "And if we fail?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Then we vanish," I said simply. "The strong will take our iron, and the weak will forget our name." The words settled like iron dust, heavy, final, undeniable. No one spoke after that. I began the preparations at once. The Iron Host was divided into 3 spear columns, each under a captain trained in discipline and formation warfare. The first spear would strike north to secure the Frost Vale mines, vital for expanding smelting capacity. The second spear would move west along the river routes, establishing outposts for trade and irrigation. The third, under my direct command, would march south into the Ember Plains, a territory controlled by the remnants of the Sky Flame. The campaign's goal was not annihilation, but subjugation, to force the tribes into the Iron Pact through swift, decisive victories that left no room for rebellion. We prepared in silence. The forges ran day and night, producing spears, arrowheads, and modular armor plates. Blacksmiths hammered to the rhythm of drums. Every morning, the soldiers drilled until their feet blistered and their arms bled, until formation became instinct and obedience, breath. The fields beyond the walls were cleared for grain and stockpiled with dried meat and salted fish. Iron Hollow had become a single organism, every forge hand and heartbeat synchronized toward one purpose, the campaign. At dawn on the eve of departure, I stood before the Iron Host as snow began to fall again. Light, almost reverent. Thousands of soldiers lined the valley floor, their ranks stretching from the riverbank to the tree-line. I saw in their faces not zeal, but resolve, the kind that comes from hunger, loss, and the hard-won knowledge that the world offers only what one dares to seize. I raised my hand, and the wind caught the banner above me, the circle and flame gleaming against the pale sky. We march not for conquest, I said, my voice carrying across the frozen expanse, but for the right to endure. Let the world know that Iron Hollow does not bow. It shapes. The horn sounded. The Iron Host began its march, boots thundering in unison, spears glinting like a river of light cutting through the snow. Behind us, the village bells tolled farewell, a sound that lingered in the air long after we passed beyond the valley. Ahead lay blood, victory, and the uncertain promise of empire. But in that moment, watching the banners sway and the steam rise from the armored ranks, I understood something deeper than triumph. The Iron Campaign was not merely the expansion of land or power. It was the final test of the idea that had birthed Iron Hollow itself, that knowledge and unity could remake the world. The mountains swallowed our footsteps as we descended toward the plains. The first empire of a new age was about to be written, not in parchment or prophecy, but in fire and iron. The first battle of the Iron Campaign began beneath a dawn the color of ash. The Ember Plains stretched wide and barren before us, a wasteland of cracked soil and low, smoking vents that still bled warmth from ancient volcanic scars. The remnants of the sky flame made their camp here, fierce nomads hardened by the very fire that had nearly consumed us months ago. Scouts reported their numbers, 300 warriors, armed with crude obsidian blades and scavenged spears. Against them, I led 800 of the Iron Host, trained, disciplined, armed with forged iron. But numbers alone were never victory. The plains favored speed, ambush, chaos. I intended to turn that chaos into order. Before dawn, I divided the host into 3 detachments. The first spear would circle west under cover of the ridges, striking from behind once the signal fires were lit. The second spear would lie hidden along the ravine, where the wind carried dust thick enough to blind eyes and dull sound. I rode with the third, a forward vanguard of shock troops armed with reinforced shields and the newest iron-tipped javelins. When the first light crested the horizon, the enemy drums began to pound, low, rhythmic, primal. Smoke rose from their fires, forming dark spirals against the silver sky. My hand tightened on the signal torch. This was no longer a test of invention or diplomacy. This was the birth of war. Loose formation, I ordered quietly. The soldiers spread, crouching low behind the cracked mounds. Across the plain, the Sky Flame warriors began their charge, wild, screaming, bare-chested under furs, brandishing torches and spears. Their fury was raw, almost beautiful in its simplicity. But fury could not break iron. I lit the torch, hurled it into the air, and it burst into orange flame. The echoing horns of the host answered at once. From the ridges came the roar of the first spear, their iron blades flashing in the sun as they crashed down into the enemy flank. The second spear erupted from the ravine, the dust storm masking their movement until they were already among the enemy lines. The Sky Flame's formation disintegrated before they even understood what had struck them. Then came the volleys. Rows of javelin men hurled their weapons in perfect rhythm, the air filled with a hiss like rain through leaves. The impact was devastating. Shields shattered. Men fell screaming, and their lines broke apart like dried bark under a hammer. I advanced at the head of the third spear, shield raised, driving straight through the center. The clang of metal against bone, the roar of voices, the heat of blood, all of it merged into one living current. It was not chaos anymore. It was engineering, precision, execution. My soldiers moved as one organism, the Iron Host in its truest form. The Sky Flame leader, a giant wrapped in crimson hides, met me in the fray. His blade, chipped obsidian bound to bone, struck with the fury of a cornered beast. I parried, twisted, and countered with a blow to his gut, then another to his shoulder. He stumbled, eyes wide not with pain, but disbelief that something crafted, something forged could defeat raw strength. Fire burns bright, I told him as my spear pierced his chest, but iron endures. He fell without a sound. Around us, the last of his warriors scattered, broken, fleeing into the smoke. When the battle ended, the plains were silent except for the crackle of cooling embers. The Iron Host stood bloodied but unbroken, their armor scorched, their breath misting in the cold morning air. The banners rose once more, the circle in flame, and a cheer rippled across the ranks, low and resonant. The first campaign of Iron Hollow had begun, and its first victory was absolute. Yet even as I looked upon the field, I felt no triumph, only the weight of momentum. This victory would echo far beyond the Ember Plains. Every tribe watching would either bow or burn. The age of fire had ended. The age of iron had begun. The smoke had barely cleared when I ordered the field secured. No celebration, no delay. Victory meant nothing without control. The surviving Sky Flame warriors, those who hadn't fled into the canyons, were rounded up, bound with braided hemp cords, and brought before the forged banners. Some spat at the ground in defiance. Others knelt in silent resignation. I studied them closely. These were men hardened by starvation and fire, unbroken even in defeat. To simply slaughter them would waste both potential and message. Those who surrender will live under iron law, I declared. Those who resist will feed the earth. The translator repeated my words, and I saw the shift. Fear in some, resolve in others, but also understanding. Even among primitives, order had a weight that chaos could not match. A dozen bowed first, then 20 more. Soon, nearly half the captives knelt, heads lowered. I gave the command to unbind them. You will work. You will build. And in time, you will stand as free men again. With the field pacified, I turned to the engineers, former hunters now armed with hammers and chisels. Strip the camp. Nothing wasted. They moved like ants, hauling hides, wood, broken weapons, even shards of obsidian for future tools. The Sky Flame tents, though crude, had strong frames of bone and woven reed. These became the foundations for temporary workshops. We scavenged their food, melted their arrowheads, and began erecting signal towers across the ridge. From one of the vents nearby, I noticed the faint metallic sheen of slag in the soil, evidence of old volcanic ore. Perfect for a forward forge. Within a day, furnaces were being built from scavenged clay and stone, while prisoners and soldiers alike carried water from the river to temper metal. I could see the future rising from the ashes already, a bastion not just of defense, but of permanence. By the third day, the first outpost took form. Rough walls of timber and stone, trenches dug deep, gates reinforced with hammered plates. We named it Emberhold, a fortress born from conquest and necessity. Inside its perimeter, smoke rose from the first field forge as iron sparked anew. I oversaw the layout personally, sketching patterns in the dirt, grid paths for patrols, drainage for rain, and towers at each corner to give us line of sight over the plains. The prisoners worked alongside our own men, watched closely, but fed well. They learned the rhythm of the host, order, discipline, reward. Already, murmurs spread among them that Iron Hollow treated even its enemies with structure and fairness. Fear began to turn into something else, respect. At night, I stood upon the half-built wall, the plains stretching endless before me, glowing faintly from volcanic vents. The wind carried the scent of ash and forge smoke. Below, soldiers shared quiet meals with their new laborers. The lines between conqueror and conquered blurred in the flickering firelight. It struck me then that I was no longer leading a tribe, nor even a growing city. I was shaping the first state, a force bound not by blood, but by system. That realization burned hotter than any forge. The system itself seemed to acknowledge it. Settlement established, Emberhold. Tier 2 fortification. Influence expanded. New feature unlocked. Vassal integration protocol. The message faded, but its meaning lingered. Integration. Peace through structure. Dominion through progress. I gazed toward the horizon, where the silhouettes of other tribes might already be gathering in fear or awe. Let them come, I whispered. We will teach them the weight of iron. The night wind howled in answer, carrying sparks from the forge across the dark expanse, a promise written in ember and ambition. Morning broke over Emberhold with a golden haze, the air thick with the scent of molten metal and freshly turned earth. The fortress was alive, soldiers marching in rows, forges roaring, prisoners laboring not as slaves, but as citizens under supervision. The rhythm of a civilization had begun, fragile yet undeniable. Standing on the ramparts, I realized what this moment truly meant. No longer was I a mere survivor clawing through a primitive world. I was a ruler in the making. Yet power without law would rot from within. So that day, before the assembled warriors, smiths, and the trembling remnants of the Sky Flame tribe, I spoke the first decree. From this day forth, the land under Emberhold shall be bound by iron law. Every man shall earn his keep through labor. Every hand shall be fed by the strength of their work, and no blood shall be spilled without judgment. My voice echoed through the courtyard, steady and measured. Those who create, protect, and build shall rise as kin beneath the iron banner. The decree was simple, almost primitive, yet it carried the weight of civilization itself, a shift from might to merit. The system shimmered faintly in response, as if acknowledging the birth of governance. Iron law established, foundational governance created. Loyalty plus 25%. Population stability plus 10%. Beneath the glowing text, I saw the first outlines of new structures taking form within the clan interface. Judiciary node, Council of Labor, Fortress Registry. It was no longer a survival ledger. It was a government system, adaptive and scalable. My engineers, once hunters and outcasts, became wardens of their new crafts. Or distribution, forge production, and food rations were charted onto bark scrolls using charcoal ink. Each name marked, each task recorded. From chaos, order emerged. Watching it unfold filled me with a strange awe. This was how humanity once rose from ashes to empire, one law at a time. When dusk came, I walked through the streets of Emberhold, if streets they could be called, narrow paths of hardened clay lined with crude huts and storage pits. Children of both tribes played in the dust, laughing as they chased each other with sticks shaped like spears. The sound pierced deeper than any war cry. It meant continuity. I passed a forge where a young Sky Flame woman hammered metal alongside an iron hollow smith, sparks leaping between their tools like shared language. This was how unity began, not with treaties, but with shared purpose. I felt the corners of my mouth lift, unbidden. The seed of a kingdom was alive, pulsing with heat and hope. That night, I returned to the half-built citadel's central hall, a wide chamber framed by stone pillars, each etched with crude carvings of flame and iron. Upon a rough slab of basalt, I carved the words that would guide every future decree: strength through craft, peace through order, unity through iron. The first doctrine of the Iron Kingdom. As I finished the final stroke, the air shimmered again with system light. Milestone reached, civilization threshold achieved. Title unlocked, Warden of Iron. I felt the hum of energy rush through me, not divine, but deeply human, born from vision, discipline, and will. I looked down at my scarred hands, the same ones that had dug through mud and stone mere months ago. Now they shaped destiny. I realized then that civilization wasn't forged by gods, but by men desperate enough to dream beyond hunger. Outside, the forge fires roared like 1,000 beating hearts, and the night sky shimmered with ember trails drifting upward. I stood at the threshold of something vast, a new age that would bear my name long after I turned to dust. I whispered to the wind, a vow and a challenge both. Let history begin. The morning mists rolled across the ember plains like silver breath from a sleeping titan, softening the edges of the new kingdom that had taken root there. From the ramparts of Ember Hold, I looked down upon the veins of progress spreading outward, canals glittering under dawnlight, smelters breathing crimson smoke, fields of grain swaying in rows as though the earth itself had learned discipline. Months had passed since the first decree of iron law, and already the tribe had evolved beyond its origins. Hunters had become farmers, smiths, artisans, warriors, builders. I had divided the land into labor districts, Forge Quarter, Grain Reach, and River Spine, each ruled by overseers sworn to merit, not bloodline. It was strange, this slow birth of order from chaos. The same people who once tore raw meat from bone now debated crop rotations and irrigation methods with earnest fervor. I stood atop the citadel balcony, surveying the rhythm below, feeling both pride and fear at how quickly the human will adapted when guided by purpose. The forges were no longer mere pits of charcoal and wind. They were early prototypes of blast furnaces, built with clay chimneys lined by smooth stones and fed by bellows made from animal hide. The first true smelted bars of iron gleamed on wooden racks, stamped with the sigil I had designed, a twin hammer crossing a sunburst, the mark of Iron Hollow's transformation into the Iron Kingdom. The system interface flickered softly before my eyes, new modules forming like roots in fertile soil. Agricultural Division, Trade Network, Civic Codex. Each function represented not just technology, but governance, an invisible architecture binding people to progress. I began recording every design on treated bark sheets, sketching plans for watermills, plowshares, and storage silos. The dream of a self-sustaining kingdom was no longer fantasy. It was blueprint. But dreams required hands and loyalty to endure. Sira returned from her scouting duties around this time, her once wild posture tempered by discipline, yet still bearing that glint of defiance that had first drawn my respect. She entered the council chamber without ceremony, a strip of soot still on her cheek. The river to the south floods predictably, she reported, spreading a rough map before me. If we build here, she tapped the parchment, we can trap silt for richer soil. Her insight impressed the newly formed Council of Labor, composed of elders and young artisans alike. Watching her explain hydrology to men twice her age stirred something deep, admiration, perhaps, or the dangerous beginnings of affection. Yet I kept my tone even as I replied, then we'll call it the Sira Canal. Laughter rippled through the chamber, breaking the formality for the first time that day. It was a simple exchange, but marked a shift. The governance of Iron Hollow was no longer mine alone. It was becoming shared, lived, and human. Night often found me at the forges with the apprentices, sleeves rolled and soot streaking my face. Together we experimented with new alloy mixtures, iron tempered with traces of carbon scraped from charred bones, producing steel of faint blue sheen. When the first blade cut clean through a stone-tipped spear, the forge erupted in cheers. "King Juan Steel," they shouted, though I quickly corrected them. "Not mine, ours." Yet inside, a thrill pulsed. This was what civilization was, the transformation of knowledge into collective power. As the molten glow lit the workers' faces, I saw the future in their eyes. A nation forged not by divine blessing, but by relentless effort. By the time the next moon rose full, fields of barley bent under the wind like golden waves. We built granaries of stone and clay. Using airflow designs, I adapted from ancient ventilation principles. Hunger, once our daily enemy, retreated before abundance. The system acknowledged the achievement. Sustenance level, stable. Starvation risk eliminated. Population growth plus 12%. I found myself smiling more often then, not from pride, but from relief. Children no longer cried from hunger. Mothers no longer rationed scraps. For the first time, peace had weight, texture, and sound. The hum of spinning wheels, the murmur of trade, the rhythm of metal on metal. The Iron Kingdom breathed. The idea of knowledge as a weapon began to take root in my mind long before the Iron Kingdom had walls strong enough to repel an army. It came one evening when a young apprentice approached me with a broken chisel, asking not for a replacement, but to learn how to forge a better one himself. That single question revealed what I had overlooked. Iron and stone could be shaped endlessly, but without minds to refine them, progress would rust. The next day, I ordered the construction of the Hall of Sparks on the eastern terrace of Emberhold, where the sun rose first and the forge smoke cleared last. It would serve as both workshop and school, a place where artisans, builders, and thinkers could gather to exchange ideas. There were no titles or ranks inside its walls. Anyone with a question could enter. Anyone with an answer could teach. When the first flame was lit beneath its roof, the kingdom system pulsed to life again. Institution created. Hall of Sparks. Knowledge production plus 35%. Innovation rate increased. Watching villagers, once hunters and nomads, now argue about airflow, metallurgy, and seed preservation, I felt the impossible become ordinary. Sira often sat beside me in those sessions, sketching maps or translating the tongue of the southern tribes into our written marks. She had an instinct for clarity, the way she could take tangled thought and hammer it into direction. Our conversations drifted beyond duty into how people thought, how they remembered, how they loved. In the old tribes, she told me once, stories were kept in hearts, not stone. But hearts die, I replied, then we'll write them in iron. She smiled faintly, the firelight tracing gold along her cheek. It was the first time the word we felt heavier than command. The line between alliance and affection blurred, unspoken yet constant. Rumors stirred among the council, but none dared voice them. To the people, our partnership symbolized balance, strategy and intuition, logic and spirit. To me, it became something deeper, a reminder that leadership wasn't built on solitude, but on shared vision. The Hall of Sparks became the nucleus of our transformation. From its doors came innovations that reshaped the very rhythm of life. Plows sharpened with hardened steel, kills capable of firing pottery strong enough to store grain for seasons, water wheels that spun with quiet persistence along the river. I began drafting the first civic codex, a living document of rights and responsibilities. Every villager was to be bound not by blood or birth, but by contribution, builders, smiths, farmers, scribes, each recognized by skill. We are not tribes anymore, I told the gathered citizens during the codex's reading. We are people. Our strength is not in how we fight, but how we build. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was quiet, reverent, like the first heartbeat of a newborn. As order deepened, so did complexity. For every forge that blazed, there was a dispute over resource control. For every field that prospered, a thief tempted by grain. Thus, I established the Council of Judgment, formed from elders and young mind alike. Their duty, mediate, investigate, preserve fairness. I wrote one guiding principle above their hall. Iron bends, but never breaks. It became our judicial creed. The system acknowledged it subtly. Social cohesion increased. Corruption risk minimal. Watching disputes resolved through dialogue instead of violence gave me a quiet satisfaction no victory in battle had ever offered. Civilization, I realized, was not measured by walls or swords, but by how men chose restraint. One evening, as I left the council chambers, Sira stood waiting beneath the torchlight. "You're changing them," she said softly. "You're changing all of us." Her gaze was steady, unreadable. I hesitated before replying, "No, they're changing themselves. I only gave them tools." She stepped closer, eyes glinting like the first spark off steel. Tools need hands, and hands need faith. The words lingered between us, heavy and intimate. In that silence, With the kingdom breathing around us, I understood the fragile thread binding power and connection. For the first time, I wondered not just what kind of king I was becoming, but what kind of man. The dawn that followed marked the birth of a new order, one less ruled by instinct and more by intent. I named it the Council of Ingenuity, a circle drawn not from warriors or nobles, but from craftsmen, healers, and thinkers who understood creation as a form of power. Each member oversaw a discipline: metallurgy, agriculture, construction, and learning. Together, we gathered within the Hall of Sparks every seventh day, sketching designs on clay tablets and carving symbols into polished bone to record discoveries. I encouraged disagreement, believing conflict of ideas birthed stronger truth. Sira sat beside me as translator and voice of the people, her insight weaving harmony through chaos. Beneath her steady counsel, our inventions grew in both scope and soul. Irrigation canals stretching toward barren lands, seed rotation cycles learned through observation, and a new alloy tempered with carbon that gleamed like captured sunlight. The system responded as if alive, pulsing faintly in the back of my mind. Innovation Council established. Agricultural yield plus 42%. Resource efficiency increased. Civilization tier, bronze proto-iron. The words shimmered and vanished, but their meaning burned within me. We were no longer surviving. We were evolving. As the harvests multiplied, so did our responsibilities. The people now looked to me not as a savior from ruin, but as a guide through prosperity, a heavier crown than any made of gold. With full granaries came envy. With comfort came ambition. I saw it in the murmurs during council meetings, in the way younger men admired Sira's growing influence beside me. She never flaunted it, but power, once shared, always sparked curiosity and fear. Some whispered she controlled me, others that our bond was divine sanction. I let the rumors breathe, neither confirming nor denying. For in every society, myth served better than decree. And yet, beneath the duties and diplomacy, affection rooted itself in quiet hours, her hand brushing mine while reviewing plans, her laughter breaking tension after long councils. In her presence, the burdens of leadership felt lighter, the world less hollow. It frightened me, this vulnerability, because affection made a man hesitate, and hesitation in a king could destroy a kingdom. Still, I could not deny her importance. It was Sira who suggested the river blessing, a festival where the people offered grain to the water in gratitude for harvest. It united the farmers and forgers, reminding them that progress was still bound by nature's mercy. During that celebration, I walked among my people without escort. Children ran barefoot through the dust. Artisans displayed tools brighter than any spear, and laughter carried across the riverbanks. I realized then that the foundation of a nation was not iron or authority. It was belonging. That night, as drums echoed and lanterns drifted over water, Sira stood beside me. "Do you see it?" she whispered. "This is what you've built." I looked out over the glowing faces and murmured, "No, this is what we've built." But joy, like harvest, demanded maintenance. The more we produced, the more intricate our balance became. Fields required workers, forges needed fuel, scholars demanded materials. I found myself calculating resources not as an engineer, but as a ruler balancing hearts. Some days I longed for the simplicity of my arrival, when every choice was survival, not philosophy. Now, every decision rippled through thousands of lives. The system whispered updates, production metrics, happiness levels, mortality rates, as though mocking my humanity with its precision. I began to question whether I was serving my people's needs or feeding my own hunger for creation. Power, once necessary, had become intoxicating. Sira sensed the tension before I confessed it. One evening, she placed her hand over mine during council. "You can't build everything yourself," she said. "Teach them to build without you. That's the true test of king." Her words pierced deeper than any blade. I realized the next step wasn't expansion, but succession, creating structures that could endure beyond my hands. I began drafting apprenticeships, documenting every forge design, every farming method, every civic law. If I die tomorrow, I told the council, this knowledge must live. The Hall of Sparks soon became a library, scrolls stored in clay jars sealed against fire and decay. The kingdom system responded once more. Legacy protocol activated, civilization stability plus 20%. Succession viability increased. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had taken another step towards something greater than empire, continuity. Yet even as Iron Hollow prospered, a faint unease lingered. Progress always demanded sacrifice, and I feared what might be lost in the forging. As night deepened, I walked through the quiet forges alone, the air thick with iron and memory. Sira found me there once, staring into the molten glow. "You can't carry the world alone," she said softly. I turned toward her, and for the first time in years, allowed myself to rest. Not as a leader, not as a builder, but as a man, sharing warmth beside the woman who had become both compass and conscience. The fire between us that night was not of steel, but of hearts finally unshielded. The following season became known as the Year of Iron Blossoms, for every forge in the kingdom seemed to bloom with new light. The Hall of Sparks overflowed with apprentices, their arms dark with soot, their eyes bright with curiosity. I announced a decree forming the Guild of the Anvil, the first state-funded order devoted solely to metalcraft. Each member swore an oath not to hoard secrets, but to pass them down to the next generation. It was an audacious move, one that frightened older artisans who had built their prestige upon mystery. "You would give away our craft?" one protested. I replied simply, "A single hand may guard fire, but 1,000 hands can carry the sun." The guild halls rose across the kingdom, and soon the sound of hammer against steel echoed through valleys like a heartbeat. Experimentation flourished, folding iron with charcoal in layered heats, tempering edges in oil instead of water, discovering that slow cooling yielded strength greater than bronze ever knew. One dawn, when the first steel blade rang true under my strike, the system glimmered once more. New technology unlocked carbon steel forging. Military strength plus 65%. Durability increased. Sira stood at my side as the blade cooled, the reflection of its glow tracing across her eyes. "You've taught them to shape metal as though it were language," she murmured. I smiled faintly. "And language can build or destroy." She nodded, understanding more than I said. In those quiet hours between councils and forges, our companionship deepened beyond command. We spoke of governance, of the burden of legacy, and sometimes of the loneliness that power could not mend. There was comfort in those talks, a closeness born of mutual purpose. When I faltered under the strain of expectation, her presence steadied me, reminding me that the kingdom's foundation was not iron alone but trust. The rumors that followed mattered little. What endured was the shared conviction that knowledge itself was sacred and that both of us were its guardians. But not everyone welcomed this unity. The rise of the guilds disrupted the old order of barter and favor. Merchants who once controlled the trade of tools now saw their profits dissolve. Elders who prized their lineage felt overshadowed by young smiths whose worth came from skill, not blood. In the western quarter of Emberhold, whispers turned to meetings, quiet gatherings of those who feared that equality would erase their privilege. The Council of Ingenuity began fracturing along unseen lines. Some demanded that the guilds pay tribute to the council. Others wanted the council dissolved entirely. Sira advised patience. Yet I sensed in her tone the same worry that haunted me. That knowledge, once freed, could not be caged again. To preserve balance, I created a new office, the Ministry of Trades, to mediate between artisans and merchants. It would oversee production, regulate resource flow, and maintain fairness in pricing. The minister I appointed was Huron, an old friend from the early days of Iron Hollow, whose loyalty I trusted beyond measure. But even loyalty can warp beneath power's weight. Within months, reports reached me of bribes, hidden deals, and manipulation of or supply. I confronted Huron in private, his face pale under torchlight. "Do you deny it?" I asked. His silence was answer enough. I dismissed him quietly to avoid scandal. Yet the damage spread through rumor faster than any decree could mend. The illusion of perfect governance had cracked. That night, I walked with Sira through the still forges, the air heavy with the scent of coal. "You gave them too much freedom too fast," she said, not as accusation but sorrow. "A forge must be watched, or the fire will eat the house." I sighed, the weight of command pressing upon my shoulders. If I chained the fire, we returned to darkness. She touched my arm gently. "Then teach them to guard it with you." Her faith rekindled my resolve. The next morning, I addressed the guild masters, not as ruler, but as fellow craftsmen. "Our kingdom's strength lies in trust," I declared. "If greed divides us, the steel we forge will turn against our hearts." The hall fell silent, and one by one, they placed their hammers upon the floor, a gesture of renewed unity. From that day, a new principle guided Iron Hollow. Knowledge shared is kingdom multiplied. Guild workshops reopened with transparent ledgers, and an apprentice from any family could rise by merit alone. The unrest faded into focus. Dissent transformed into competition of ideas. When the next harvest came, steel plows carved deeper, irrigation spread wider, and the people whispered a new name for me, the Forge Mind King. I accepted it not as praise, but as a warning. For every step toward greatness demanded vigilance against pride. And in the quiet that followed, as the city slept beneath a canopy of sparks, Sira's voice drifted through the stillness. "Remember, even iron forgets its shape if the flame burns too long." I nodded, silently promising her and myself that our fire would endure, not consume. The first storm of autumn brought more than rain. It carried unease. As Iron Hollow's forges burned brighter, so too did its questions. Temples rose beside workshops, shrines beside storehouses, yet few now prayed as their ancestors once had. The people began to revere the forge itself, not as a tool, but as symbol of creation, endurance, and change. Old priests murmured that iron had stolen the reverence once owed to the sky gods. "The fire that melts stone," they warned, "will melt faith next." I cannot dismiss their fears. Every tool I had given the people, steel, irrigation, written law, had strengthened their hands but thinned their ties to the unseen. Was progress worth the erosion of wonder? In council, I posed a question to my advisors. Can a people grow wise without losing their gods? Silence followed. Sira, ever fearless, answered first. Perhaps wisdom is the god they seek. The others stirred uneasily, for it was a dangerous thought to replace divinity with knowledge. Yet I saw truth in her words. The kingdom was becoming something neither tribe nor empire had been before, a living organism of will and invention. Its heartbeat the anvil's ring, its breath the hum of thought. Still, I feared the void that might swallow us if faith vanished entirely. For what binds men stronger than belief? I ordered a convocation unlike any before, a gathering of voices. From every valley and tribe, I invited priests, poets, and philosophers to Iron Hollow to debate the soul of our civilization. For 7 days, they filled the Hall of Ash and Flame with argument and song. The firemenders spoke of balance between matter and spirit. The scholars of the forge claimed that creation itself was sacred and that to craft was to worship. On the final night, a young initiate, barely more than a child, rose trembling and said, "Perhaps the gods do not fear the forge. Perhaps they wait within it." Her words silenced the hall. Her words silenced the hall. I felt then that a new faith had been born, not in opposition to the old, but in continuation of it. Thus was founded the Order of the Ember Veil, a union of priest and craftsmen, whose creed held that divine will resided in the act of shaping, whether steel, field, or soul. Their temples doubled as libraries, their altars as workbenches. They anointed apprentices not with oil, but with soot, calling them children of the flame. For the first time, spirituality and progress no longer pulled against each other. They turned together like gears in a great unseen machine. Yet harmony, as I knew too well, was never permanent. The spread of the new faith unsettled old hierarchies. Tribal elders, whose authority had rested upon ancestral rites, saw their influence eroding. Some accused me of heresy, whispering that I sought to make myself a god through steel and fire. Even within the council, divisions widened. Scholars who wished for secular governance clashed with the Ember Veil priests who saw me as their chosen founder. I refused both titles, neither emperor nor prophet. I'm a builder, I told them. The kingdom is the forge. The rest is smoke. But smoke, once seen, cannot be unseen. Amid these tensions, Sira remained my compass. You cannot shape belief as you shape iron, she said one evening as we watched the lights of the city flicker below. Faith grows in the cracks where reason ends. I answered quietly, then I must learn to guide what I cannot hold. She smiled faintly. That is all any ruler can do. Her words stayed with me through the coming months as I began commissioning monuments, not to myself, but to the spirit of creation. Towers carved with runes of learning rose beside rivers. Statues of anonymous smiths lined the roads, their hands open toward the sky. When the first festival of sparks was held, I stood among the people as fireworks of molten copper streaked across the night. Children chanted the new hymn of the Ember Veil, "The Flame Remembers." In that moment, I understood that Iron Hollow had become more than survival, more than strength. It had become story. Our civilization now carried memory in metal and belief in the act of making. Yet beneath the beauty of that revelation stirred a quiet dread. For every faith, even one forged from reason, could one day demand its own sacrifices. The first embers of rebellion glowed in the west. News came from the riverfront outposts. Elders of the Moss Plains had declared the forged faith a blasphemy, denouncing Iron Hollow as a kingdom of false gods and broken oaths. They claimed the steel, plows, poisoned the soil, that the smoke of the furnaces drove away ancestral spirits. Within weeks, villages that once paid tribute began refusing iron shipments, hoisting banners woven with green reed and bone, a symbol of the old ways. The coalition of roots, they called themselves, an alliance of clans bound by fear of the new world I had built. It was not a war of swords, not yet, but of whispers, trade embargoes, and slow starvation of loyalty. In the Council of Innovation, debates flared hotter than the furnaces themselves. The Ember Veil urged swift correction through education. Let them see the forge as sacred, and they will return. The generals, less patient, called for iron discipline and punitive marches. Fire burns rot, said Commander Run, and rebellion is rot. Sira, seated beside me, cut through their noise with quiet clarity. Fire can also consume the house it was meant to warm. Her warning lingered as I faced the map spread before me. Dots marking towns that had once traded faith for progress, now retreating to superstition and fear. I cannot blame them entirely. The forged faith had risen too fast, too bright. Many still remembered the hunger years, when survival depended not on iron, but on ancestral rites and seasons. To them, Iron Hollow's machines and monuments seemed alien, proof of arrogance rather than salvation. I ordered emissaries to travel west, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. They carried no weapons, only gifts of steel sickles, water wheels, and small firestones that could light a hearth without flint. Show them creation, not conquest, I told the envoys. Let them see that the forge serves, not rules. Yet beneath my calm, I knew some wounds could not be soothed by reason. Weeks passed. Reports trickled back, temples burned, messengers turned away, and a preacher from the old faith crucified on the gates of a smithy as a warning. The Moss Plains had chosen their symbol well. Their rebellion was not against me, but against change itself. I convened a secret council in the Hall of Iron Light. We stand at the edge of our own myth, I said. If the people believe progress devours the past, they will destroy it before it matures. The Ember Veil's high forge keeper bowed his head. Then we must sanctify the past anew, melt it into the future, not discard it. It was then that the idea came to me, a festival of unity blending the rites of the ancestors with the flame of the forge. We called it the rite of reforging. Across the valleys, fires were lit not for war, but for remembrance. The elders of each clan brought relics, bones, charms, carvings, and laid them in the molten crucible beside ingots of steel. Together they melted into a single mass, which the smith priest hammered into a new symbol, a spiral of iron and bone intertwined, neither overpowering the other. I declared it the emblem of the Iron Kingdom, a reminder that the new must never erase the old, only refine it. For a time, the rebellion quieted. The Moss Plains sent envoys under truce, curious, cautious, their songs heavy with uncertainty but no longer hatred. Yet even as peace seemed to return, I sensed the fracture widening in silence. The rite had soothed fear, but not healed faith. The coalition had tasted unity of their own, and unity, even in opposition, breeds power. The thought haunted me as I stood upon the balcony that night, the glow of the forges painting the city below in red and gold. Sira joined me, her hair catching the firelight like a banner of dusk. "You gave them meaning again," she said softly. "For now," I answered. "But what happens when meaning changes faster than the hearts that hold it?" She touched my arm. "Then you must forge hearts too, Liwan." Her words, though tender, were a warning, and I knew then that the true challenge of empire was not the shaping of iron, but of faith. The founding of the Temple of the Twin Flames began not with the ringing of hammers, but the silence of a people caught between worlds. I knew faith could not be commanded. It had to be woven, thread by thread, from what the people already believed. Thus, I summoned the surviving elders of the old faith and the new forge keepers of Iron Hollow to a council beneath the half-built dome of the Grand Foundry. If the forge is our heart, I told them, then let faith be its flame, one that burns in two colors, never one devouring the other. The idea was simple, yet radical. The old flame would represent tradition, earth, and ancestry. The new flame, progress, metal, and human will. Together, their dual altar would symbolize harmony between nature and craft, past and future. But harmony, I soon learned, is the most fragile alloy of all. Construction of the temple became a labor of devotion. The dome itself, fused stone carved with ancestral sigils, and iron ribs polished to mirror brightness, each reflecting the other in balance. Pilgrims came from distant valleys to see the work. Old women knelt and whispered prayers to their forgotten gods. Young apprentices from the forges offered shards of metal as tokens of hope. I saw in their mingled gestures something profound, a people not rejecting the past, but reshaping it. And yet, beneath that beauty, I sensed the friction of ambition. The forge keepers argued over doctrine. The elders fought over ceremony, and unseen hands began moving coins and influence to claim ownership of the newborn faith. Religion, I realized, was a forge hotter than any I had ever built. Rumors reached me of a sect within the forge keepers calling themselves the Ember Truth. They whispered that the old flame was a lie, that the gods had long perished and only human will remain divine. Their leader, a smith priest named Kale, preached from the shadows. The metal remembers no ghost. Only the hand that shapes it endures. It was dangerous, intoxicating rhetoric. It spread quickly among the younger artisans who had never known hunger or prayer, only invention and pride. The council warned me to crush it before it took root. But I hesitated. I saw in Kale's defiance a mirror of my own beginnings, when I first raised fire against the dark. Could I condemn in him the same hunger for progress that had once saved us all? Instead, I chose balance once more. I decreed that both flames, the old and the new, would burn together during every ceremony, and that each forge built in the kingdom must have an altar of dual flame within its hall. The decree pleased none fully, but angered none enough to rebel. It was a ruler's compromise, to build stability from shared dissatisfaction. Yet peace built on silence always trembles. Late one night, Sira brought me word that Kale's sermons had grown bolder. He spoke now of ascension through metal, a prophecy claiming that when the perfect alloy was forged, The gods would fall and mortals would inherit the sky. He draws the ambitious to him, she said, eyes dark with worry. Those who think the kingdom should serve invention, not life. I dismissed the reports publicly, but pondered them privately. Power, faith, and creation, all born from the same fire, could as easily consume as illuminate. I tasked the silent recorders, my secret scholars, to observe Kale's following in the foundries, to map who listened, who gave, who whispered. Their notes painted a kingdom divided not by swords, but by belief in destiny. The old faith saw the world as cyclical, bound to the soil. The forged faith saw it as ascending a ladder to heaven. And between them stood me, the man who had brought the ladder to earth but could not yet decide if humanity was ready to climb. When the Temple of the Twin Flames was finally completed, its twin altars burned brighter than the sun itself, seen for miles across the valley. The crowd roared as the first fire was lit, one orange, one blue, twisting together in an eternal spiral. For a fleeting moment, I felt unity. Then I saw Kale among the crowd, his eyes fixed on the blue flame, his lips moving in silent prayer to no God I knew. A chill passed through me like smoke before storm. Even as I smiled and blessed the gathered people, I knew the kingdom's faith had split again, not into two, but into three. And the third was the most dangerous of all, belief in man as God. Power, once clothed in armor and iron, now wore robes and incense. Within the high chambers of the Council of Innovation, I began to see the same corrosion that once ate empires from within. Not rust, but ambition. The priests of the Twin Flames sought more than reverence. They sought jurisdiction. They spoke of tithes to sustain the sacred fire, of temples to be funded in every province, of priests who would guide my governors. Their words, soft and reverent, were blades wrapped in silk. They were building a second court, one of spirit and influence parallel to my throne. I watched as council members aligned themselves with factions, merchants with the forge keepers, nobles with the old faith, and soldiers whispering that the ember truth might yet hold the real power of destiny. Faith had become a currency, traded like iron and grain. At first, I believed I could control it through balance, careful decrees, equal offerings, alternating rituals. But faith does not obey mathematics. It moves through emotion, fear, longing. I saw how the temple's festivals swelled larger than our military parades, how the chants of priests drowned the anthems of Iron Hollow. At banquets, they toasted not the crown, but the fire that forged it. Subtle, clever, dangerous. It was no longer my forge they revered, but the forge as God, a power independent of my rule. Even my ministers began quoting scripture in policy debates, invoking divine guidance for laws I had written through reason. And each time I protested, I saw their eyes flicker with something near pity, as though I were a craftsman arguing with thunder. Sira saw it too. Once, she had spoken with reverence for the temple, believing it a bridge between old and new. Now, her faith wavered. "We build a hearth for all hearts," she told me one night. "But now they kneel to the fire itself, not what it warms." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but disappointment. She had grown up among the tribes, among songs and ancestors, not doctrines and decrees. "You gave them knowledge, Li Wan, and they turned it into prophecy." I took her hand, but she withdrew gently. "If this continues," she whispered, "you will rule a kingdom that obeys gods instead of reason, and those gods will wear your face." The pain of her words lingered longer than the wine that night. Reports from the silent recorders confirmed her fears. Kale's ember truth was spreading not in temples, but in forges and workshops, among the youth who saw themselves as heirs to a divine human destiny. They called themselves the Children of Flame. Their doctrine was seductive. The world was unfinished, and mankind's duty was to complete it. To them, gods were obsolete myths, shackles of the past. Progress itself was the new divinity. Every strike of the hammer, one tracked red, is a prayer to perfection. My ironworkers quoted it as though it were scripture. Priests of the Twin Flames threatened, denounced them as heretics. Riots flared between followers. Iron tools turned to weapons, chants to screams. The kingdom I had built to unify now fractured beneath the weight of belief. The council split. Some urged me to outlaw Kale's movement. Others demanded I purge the old priests. Cut away both rot and root, General Rin said grimly, and plan again. But I could not bring myself to smother the spark that had once saved us all. I remember the early days, the cave, the flame, the first forge under the open stars. Had I not been as defiant, as desperate to create meaning from ash, yet I could not allow ideology to consume order. I decreed that all doctrines, whether of forge or faith, must submit to the edict of balance, the law that no flame, divine or mortal, could claim dominion over the other. But laws are words, and belief is wildfire. That night, as the kingdom slept, I stood in the temple alone. The twin flames flickered before me, one orange, one blue, twisting, colliding, splitting. I thought of Kale's eyes during the dedication, of Sira's disappointment, of the people kneeling not before their king, but before what they believed he represented. I whispered, half to the fire, half to myself, did I forge a kingdom or awaken a god? The flames swayed, answering in silence. For the first time since awakening in this world, I felt something I could not engineer doubt. It began with whispers, as all betrayals do. Sira's name, once spoken with admiration, now carried undertones of calculation. The priests of the twin flames called her the flame bearer, the divine vessel through whom inspiration flowed. Kale's disciples, ever cunning, hailed her as the first spark, the mortal proof that genius transcended gods. I saw the unease in her eyes each morning when the council met. Every word she spoke echoed through two faiths, both claiming her as their own. They offered her titles, followers, even sanctuaries to rule, all in the name of guidance. I wanted to protect her from it, but protection was no longer possible. She had become symbol and spirit, her voice a weapon I could neither wield nor silence. The weight of symbolism was cruel. It stripped the person beneath. The tension bled into our private life. Sira still came to my chambers, still smiled in quiet moments. Yet I could feel the distance, thin as silk, sharp as steel. One evening she confessed, "They use my words, Li Wan. The things I said in truth, in love, they twist into sermons." She looked away, her reflection trembling in the basin's water. "If I speak against them, I am heretic. If I stay silent, I am idle." Her voice cracked. "And if I leave, you cannot." I interrupted too harshly. She flinched. I softened my tone. "The kingdom needs your light, Sira. You keep faith from consuming reason." She stared at me long, then whispered, "And who keeps reason from consuming you?" That night, she slept beside me, but I sensed she was already drifting into another world, one where my crown cast longer shadows than warmth. Rumors spread faster than decrees. A forged letter appeared, bearing Sira's seal, claiming she had blessed the Ember Truth. The priests demanded her trial for blasphemy. Kale's followers declared her their patron. I ordered an inquiry, knowing neither faction sought truth, only victory. The council chamber became a furnace of accusation and deceit. If she falls, so falls the balance. I warned, but the murmurs grew. Kale's pamphlets appeared across the capital, quoting her words out of context. The forge is not God, but man's reflection of creation. It sounded almost divine. Priests preached that her silence confirmed her guilt. Crowds began to chant outside the temple, torches flickering like judgment itself. I realized then that my kingdom had learned to burn without me striking the flint. When Sira was summoned before the council, I could not bring myself to let another preside. I watched as she walked through the hall, graceful, composed, but pale with exhaustion. "You stand accused of sanctifying the heresy of the Ember Truth," intoned high priest Abel. "Do you deny?" Sira looked not at him, but at me. "I sanctified no heresy," she said softly, "only knowledge." The words were calm, but they cut through the chamber like a blade. Kale's faction applauded. The priests hissed. "Knowledge," Abel sneered, "is the flame that consumes the foolish." Then let it burn me, she replied. Silence fell. For a moment, I saw both the woman I loved and the spark that might undo everything I had built. After the session, I found her in the courtyard, standing beneath the twin moons. You shouldn't have said that, I said quietly. Then who will, she answered. You forge empires from iron, Liwan, but words forge faith. If you let them speak unchallenged, they will write your legacy without you. Her defiance both frightened and enthralled me. I wanted to hold her, to tell her I could fix this, that no storm was beyond reason, but the truth was colder. I could fix iron, stone, even laws. Not hearts, not belief. That night, I ordered her protection doubled, though we both knew the guards watched as much as they shielded. Kale appeared 2 days later, summoned under pretense of counsel. His eyes gleamed with the same intellect I once admired. You cannot control what has already evolved, he said. The ember truth belongs to the people now. The more you suppress it, the brighter it burns. He paused, studying me. But you can still choose how it ends. Let Sira lead it. Unite the symbols before they fracture. It was both temptation and trap. To yield would mean surrendering control of ideology. To resist would make me tyrant of thought. I dismissed him with a cold nod, but his words lingered, echoing like sparks in dry grass. In the following weeks, the air of Iron Hollow grew taut, heavy with expectation. Temples filled with pilgrims praying for unity. Workshops hummed with artisans chanting Kale's verses under their breath. I stood above the city from the palace terrace, watching the two flames of belief devour the same night. The kingdom that had once followed iron now followed ideas, and both were things that could kill. I thought of Sira's question, who would keep reason from consuming me? As the torches flickered in the streets below, I realized the answer might already be slipping from my grasp. The night the rebellion began was quiet, eerily so. No drums, no horns, only the whisper of wind across Iron Hollow's forges. And the flames rose. Kale's followers struck in perfect synchrony. Priests assassinated in their sleep, granaries set ablaze, the temple of the twin flames painted with the sigil of the ember truth. The city's heartbeat faltered as fire devoured its sanctuaries. I was in the council chamber when the first alarm sounded, a sheet of parchment still in my hand bearing Kale's ultimatum. If knowledge is divine, no man may rule it. By the time I reached the balcony, the lower terraces burned like a forge overturned, and I knew what this was, not a revolt of hunger, but of faith. The creation I tried to bind to reason had grown sentient and wild. My kingdom was burning in the shape of my own ideals. Sira was gone, her guard slain, her chambers ransacked, no sign of struggle save for a single iron pendant left on her desk. The twin flame insignia I'd forged for her months ago. It was bent, scorched at the edges, as though she had tried to remove it and failed. A cold certainty gripped me. Kale had taken her, either as martyr or messenger. I gathered what remained of the Iron Guard, their armor glinting in the Inferno's light, and led them into the streets. The rebels moved with frightening coordination, artisans and scholars among them, their weapons crude but guided by conviction. No gods, no kings, only the forge, they shouted. It was the anthem of those who once believed in me. I ordered non-lethal restraint where possible, but mercy is brittle in fire. The clash became massacre. At dawn, the rebellion's core gathered in the temple courtyard, Kale standing before the altar, Sira beside him, bound but unbroken. Release her, I commanded. She does not stand with you. He smiled, that same calm, infuriating smile. Does she not? She spoke of truth beyond crowns, of fire that belongs to all. Sira looked at me then, not with fear, but with sorrow. Liwan, she whispered, you cannot win this by force. Kale raised a blade, its edge darkened by soot. No, but he can end it by faith. Before my soldiers could move, he cut her bonds and stepped forward. Let the forge choose its god. His blade came down, not upon her, but upon the iron altar. It split, molten sparks spraying outward, igniting the oil-soaked floor. The explosion threw us apart. When I rose from the smoke, Kale was gone, the temple in ruins, and Sira lay motionless among the embers. They said later that the flames consumed half the district before dawn was fully risen. I sat beside her body in the courtyard as the ashes fell like black snow, the crown heavy in my hand. The priests came, whispering of vengeance, of purges and purification. The generals came, urging I crush the ember truth once and for all. But I heard none of them. I was thinking of the night she told me. If you let them speak unchallenged, they will write your legacy without you. And I understood at last what she had meant. Kale had not destroyed my kingdom. I had, by trying to command belief, as if it were iron, something that could be shaped, tempered, owned. When the fires died, I ordered no executions. The surviving rebels were offered amnesty, their ideology allowed to live, but within new boundaries. The forge belongs to all, I decreed, but so does the burden of its flame. I commissioned the rebuilding of the temple, not as a shrine, but as an academy where faith and reason would coexist in restless, necessary tension. I buried Sira in the foundation stone, beneath the hall where every scholar and priest would one day walk. The inscription read, "Here lies the light of iron, who taught the fire to think." That night, I stood once more upon the terrace, overlooking a city reborn from its own ruin. I no longer felt the triumph of conquest or invention, only the sober clarity of a man who had learned what kind of king he must be. Not the god of a new age, but its guardian. The Iron Kingdom would rise again, but its foundations would be mortal, imperfect, human. As the first light of dawn touched the rebuilt forges, I whispered into the wind, "We are the forge." And the flame? And the cost? The embers answered softly, like a heartbeat rekindled.